The story begins its fascinating narrative. She describes how the action develops around the entrance to the demon realm. A huge portal in the air with a diameter of several meters appeared before the eyes of readers. The mysterious phenomenon was surrounded by blue and dark blue radiance, which was accompanied by bright sparks. The portal was like a funnel or whirlpool in the ocean. A circular movement was formed in some kind of forest area, where a number of tents were set up, located next to a white tent. The camp was set up in a clean location, which was guarded by tall fir trees and lush green bushes. Apparently, the painting depicted summer because people were dressed very lightly. As it turned out, the story was about a special united ordinary group of the demon kingdom. A man was shouting something through a loudspeaker. It became known that he asked everyone to double-check their stocks, teams, and positions. A huge group of warriors stood in the background. Women and men dressed in ordinary everyday uniforms carried daggers and swords of various shapes and sizes. They were chatting about something among themselves. Then the story focused on three heroes. The first of them, a tall guy with brown hair, folded his arms on his chest and replied through a smile that he was somewhat worried, because, in his opinion, this is the first time so many people have gathered. His friend, a man with black hair, made it clear to him that there was nothing to worry about, because they had a flying tiger sect. Moreover, it was rumored that raids with her participation ended with 0 losses. Suddenly, the action caught the reader's attention. According to him, someone's male hands were sharpening a sword. And the stranger who spoke earlier added on his own that he would like to be accepted into the Flying Tiger sect. The character asked a question to some guy. Just the same, the one who sharpened his edged weapon. He had dark blue hair with long bangs covering his eyebrows, and wore a black t-shirt and pants with a purple jacket. A man with bright amber eyes sitting on 2 wooden boxes. When he was called, he raised his head. As it turned out, he was interrupted. The mysterious handsome man was thinking. Based on his thoughts, readers became aware that the Flying Tiger sect does not select members only by class. Otherwise he would not be here. The man took a deep breath and relaxed. Then the narration decided to introduce the audience to this cute character. His name was Seo Gangram. He was a member of the tertiary insect class and belonged to the Flying Tiger sect. Nevertheless, the man decided to indulge in his memories. 5 years ago, after the Day of Awakening, everyone's abilities were determined from their fate in the database. This term meant what a person was born with, and as it turned out, it depended on the day and time of his birth. Before the eyes of readers appeared a garden seal in the form of a polygon, on which there were various drawings, lines, triangles, hieroglyphs, and zigzags. It was a bright blue color, and small lights sparkled around it, floating on the waves of a light aura. According to the mysterious man, fate was complete nonsense. And now someone interrupted him, touching his broad back, hidden behind a purple jacket. A dark shadow hid the upper part of his face, on which drops of sweat could be seen appearing. Apparently, Seo Gangram got nervous when he was approached. The stranger greeted the guy with dark blue hair and asked him a question. He was interested in the truthfulness of the fact that the man belonged to the Flying Tiger sect. Moreover, he believed that they were on the same team. The speaker had dark hair that gave off a glint of brown, funny with green. He raised his head and held his neck with his left hand, at the same time saying that this was the first time he had ever taken part in a mission for the purpose of destruction. This was the reason for his nervousness, except Seo Gangram didn't answer him. The guy with a somewhat surprised look on his face stared at his interlocutor and silently watched him. In the next episode, the stranger let him know that he felt happy because he would be able to fight side by side with someone from the Flying Tiger sect. As it might seem to readers, such an interest in his person greatly alerted the guy. He lowered his head so much that his long bangs hid the upper part of his face with a shadow, thus making an accent on it. A question rang in his mind, according to which Seo Gangram was trying to find the reason why he spoke to him, making a quick guess that he was a beginner. However, after a short period of time, the speaker was hailed by a guy who was accompanied, standing on the sides, by 2 more. He raised his left hand in a gesture for a man with dark hair with a gleam of iron to approach him. What, in fact, the new character said in the next second. To which the guy asked a question. It seemed to him that the man was not talking to him, so he pointed at himself with his index finger and asked about it. When the character appeared next to him, he was instantly horrified. The reason was that the guy who called out to him reported that the person he had just tried to talk to was Seo Gangram, so he had to be careful. A man with dark hair with a green tinge raised his hands in surprise, and a charge similar to an electric charge seemed to go through his whole body. He instantly became depressed, and after a couple of seconds he glanced at the guy with whom he had been standing and talking a little earlier. A shiver ran down his face and drops of sweat rolled down. Seo Gangram turned his head slightly in his direction and at the same time sheathed his sword. Moreover, the man shouted at the top of his voice that their views had crossed, from which the whites of his eyes completely blocked the iris and pupil, thus giving them a frenzied appearance. But the aura around the mysterious character has thickened, acquiring a heavy dark shade with purple and red colors. The guy everyone shunned so much started looking for something in his brown bag. Behind him, the trio suddenly appeared and began to lead the man away, patting him on the right shoulder. In his thoughts, the main character thought that this was to be expected. And now history has finally decided to answer the questions that have arisen. The fact was that Seo Gangram killed his teammates and stole their powers. The episode began to take on a more intimidating appearance, changing its color scheme from peaceful blue to repulsive pink with a hint of purple. As it turned out, many people returned injured when they were on the same team with Seo Gangram. Moreover, death was attributed to his fate everywhere, because if someone happened to be on the same team with him, then he was bound to fail. History writes off the heavy expression on the guy's face. His languid amber-colored eyes were pronounced against the background of a face dark with shadow. Even the pupils acquired a feline appearance, due to which the man looked like a predator. The character even attributed such a stereotype to himself, referring to the fact that such rumors spread because of his strength. Then, in a new episode, Seo Gangram waved his left index finger, which made the so-called window of fate appear in front of him. On its brown background, readers could see a large seal in the form of a star with 4 yin-yang symbols. The story decided to delve into the description of the characteristics of the main character. His fate belonged to a class called the Third Dragon Stage, which meant that the guy could check the windows of his fate and the fate of other people. Moreover, as it became known a moment later, the man was able to partially extract the fate of a dead opponent and make it his own, but this, unfortunately, was added to his karma, a sinister force that allowed Seo Gangram to steal fate from a corpse. That's what it was. It was also true, according to his reflections, that many people who were his comrades were injured. For example, the picture describes how a character was stabbed in the stomach, and the second helped him move. Then the narration focuses on the figure of the main character, who was sitting on 2 wooden boxes with his head down. Due to the fact that he was drooping due to a terrible past, an aura thickened around him. It had a dark purple color and descended on the man's body in the form of toxic smoke. He made the assumption that all of them were influenced by his unfortunate fate. In the next episode, the story decided to familiarize readers with the classes of fate. There were 5 of them. The highest class was the Divine. A figure of a character with long blonde hair appeared before the eyes of the audience, who held a tall staff with a rounded end in her right hand. Even the aura around her was magical. After him came dragon, ghost, human and insect, which, in fact, was presented further. These 4 classes were divided into primary, secondary and tertiary, and, as it became known, the main character himself belonged to the lowest class, which was at the very bottom. Tactful insect class. The next episode described how Seo Gangram sat helplessly in a dark space, which was illuminated by a bright column of light falling directly on his silhouette. He bent down a little, and the ground, holding his body with his hands. In other words, he lacked the strength to kill another awakened one. From this heavy thought, the man made a dissatisfied expression on his face. He strained his eyebrows and nose, from which his wrinkles were emphasized even more, and the eyes expressed anger and, to some extent, resentment. However, the flow of his thoughts did not end there. Now Seo Gangram was explaining that there were also several conditions that had to be met in order to use his power. Except, as it turned out, the guy didn't even kill any of his comrades and didn't even steal the fate of corpses. He lowered his head and placed his right hand on his left, which held a sword scabbard. However, in the next second, the main character closed his eyes, which were hidden by the shadow of his long bangs, and wondered why he was upset at all at the moment. Suddenly, someone called out to Seo Gangram. It was a girl with dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She placed both hands on the wooden box and rested her small head on them. Her green eyes played with childish discontent, because she was interested in the question of what the guy was doing in this place all alone. Such a sudden appearance made the man wary. He jerked his hand in surprise and made a funny sound, calling the heroine by name, "You Heron," to which she pulled a beaming smile from ear to ear and replied that it was obvious. There was a dinner party planned after the extermination mission, so she asked if Seo Gangram would go. Then the story presented the following information to readers. You Heron belonged to the Divine class in the Flying Tiger sect. Suddenly, a man with short blue hair and bright blue eyes entered the dialogue. He turned to his Hyung, saying that last time Seo Gangram was not there either, so this time he just had to come. It was young Taehong, who came from the middle ghost class. He also came from the Flying Tiger sect. However, this did not help. The main character gave a firm negative answer, and then suddenly stood up and began to move in the opposite direction from his interlocutors. The guy asked him what the reason was, to which he replied that he was too lazy. That's just not the thought that flashed through my head. Even if he went, the members of other sects would still treat him like trash. Then Yu-Heron decided to say her line. She exclaimed that she had missed the school trip in order to come, and the next moment, after a couple of seconds, she made a bold assumption that it was because of losers who were afraid of the guy. The short girl put her hands on her sides and asked who they were, demanding that Seo Gangram tell her. And he turned his head over his left shoulder and asked if she was aware that he was scarier than her by more than 10 years. However, this did not confuse her, because she added out loud that her strength exceeded his. Yu-Heron puffed out her cheeks defiantly, making a touchy look. Then a tall guy, young Ti-hong, entered the dialogue. He grabbed the man by the right arm and said that everyone got drunk on the spot, so he definitely had to go. It didn't sound like a request. The main character narrowed his eyes and silently watched his buddies. Yu-Heron appeared to his left, who also positively exclaimed, adding from herself that she would cope with anyone who tried to intimidate Seo Gangram. However, they were interrupted. Someone called out to the girl and young Ti-hong. The trio turned in the direction from which the sound was coming. As it turned out, it was a tall man who understood that the guys had a desire to have fun with Seo Gangram. But the mission was about to start any minute, so they had to return to their positions. The stranger had dark brown hair with brown eyes. The story made it clear to readers that it was Kang Donghyun, who belonged to the second human class. He also, like the three heroes, was part of the Flying Tiger sect. After a couple of seconds, the girl waved her hands and, giving up, gave a positive answer. And young Ti-hong pointed to his friend and told Hyun that he had made a promise that he would come to the festive dinner. The couple began to move in the opposite direction from the main character, who waved them with his left hand in a gesture of farewell. His friend said goodbye to him, and he pulled a smile in response. Suddenly, Kang Donghyun appeared behind him, who patted Seo Gangram on the left shoulder and asked him to take care of himself. The man laughed and gave him an ambiguous reaction, referring to the fact that the groups that stood on the front line were the only ones in danger, but as for him, he was behind their backs. However, the guy was upset by the fact that the main character was still not by his side. Readers could see Seo Gangram's face up close. He looked tired because of the bruises under his eyes. The guy smiled easily and let him know that he understood, thanking him along the way. In the next episode, Kang Donghyun retired from the main character. His figure was brightly illuminated by the sunlight, which, apparently, was setting over the horizon. But the silhouette of the main character, on the contrary, remained in the shadow. However, this would not prevent readers from seeing his drooping gaze. The fact was that the man would also like to fight side by side with him. His amber eyes stood out strongly against the background of his dark face. The guy was holding a scabbard in his left hand and holding a backpack with his right. The story tells that the special mission to destroy the Demon Kingdom has finally begun. The loudspeaker was notifying everyone to start performing the duties assigned to their groups. The picture caught the attention of the audience on Seo Gangram, who stood among the crowd and watched what would be said next. Suddenly, a bright blue color appeared in the sky, which was several meters in size. Several lightning bolts were coming from this huge hole. She raised the wind and large clouds of smoke with ash. Then the narration focused on the main character, whose face seemed to shine from the glow. His hair was developing, but it still hid his closed and relaxed eyes. The guy was thinking in his head that he would just take care of the demons left behind. After all, he needed to try hard so that he would not cause damage to his sect. Then Seo Gangram passed through the blue portal, from which he sparkled and provoked the appearance of small electric charges. Suddenly, someone shouted at the top of his voice again, announcing that high-class monsters appeared in droves, so the leading groups needed to get inside as soon as possible. Several monsters of different sizes and colors appeared before the eyes of readers: blue, red, black. That's just that each of them had their eyes burning with a bright flame. How many times they were zombified. The groups that led the rear had to be ready at the entrance. The story focused on young Ti-hong, who used his hands in battle, on which gloves that emit blue lightning converged. Behind him were other guys whose magic had a pink tinge, but his girlfriend, Yu-Heron, was riding on some kind of animal. Moreover, even Kang Donghyun took part. He used some cards from which fire emanated. Suddenly, the following episode describes a blue monster that looks like a mad dog. He opened his mouth wide, decorated with sharp fangs. Thus the beast tried to grab the coveted prey. However, Kang Donghyun managed to repel his failed attack. and even Yang Tihong managed to defeat some kind of monster. A bright turquoise aura formed around him, as if it was oozing from his blow. But towards Yu Heron, sitting on a wooden figure in the form of a lioness or a panther, monsters with pink energy were moving. Suddenly, the action is transferred to the rear groups, which were given the order to prepare for battle, because now the Sogvi will be called. The reader was confronted with some kind of silhouette of a huge horned creature with long red horns and hair. A dark energy appeared around this toothy demon, and then, when he shouted and leveled up to his full height, pulsations and pressure began to appear from his body. Someone ordered the advanced groups to ignore the low-class monsters and hold their positions. That's just the story tells how the main character was surrounded by other people, next to whom a dark force flashed in places. Seo Gangram readied his sword and assumed a defensive posture. 3 creatures appeared on the horizon. These little demons had red eyes and a huge head compared to their body. Then the following episode allowed us to take a closer look at the pupils of one of them. They looked like a cat, thus giving him a predatory appearance. It might have seemed to the lounger that the monster was smiling, because now he had to catch his victim. That's just the main character did not allow it. With one swing of his cold weapon, he dealt a crushing blow to this demon, leaving a blue trail after him and causing a small gust of wind. In the next episode, Seo Gangram still continues to fight. He boldly repels the attack from his rivals. But there was no end to the monsters, they appeared from different angles. The main character, after another blow, knocked down the creature, provoking the appearance of a column of smoke and dust. But suddenly the narrative describes some long branches with sharp thorns. In his thoughts, the man came to the conclusion that there were more of them than he expected. Moreover, he was now quite deep, so much so that it was difficult for him to breathe because of the demonic energy. The guy literally gulped air greedily to restore heavy breathing. Now it was possible to understand that he was tired. Then he decided it was time to get out of there quickly. Behind Seo Gangram, a silhouette of a horned monster with predatory red eyes appeared, which froze in the air and made a swinging movement. He did not have time to react and received a blow in the back, which was accentuated by a red glow of light. This took the main character by surprise and even made him stagger forward. The story described how these little creatures gathered in one pile and smiled from ear to ear, rejoicing. Apparently, that one of them managed to harm the guy. When this creature knocked Seo Gangram to the ground and struck him, the rest of his brethren rushed towards the main character. The man closed his eyes and mentally called for help. And suddenly, a bright green glow appeared around him, which to some extent even blinded. The painting describes the appearance of a long vine with thorns. I saw a girl with brown hair on top of her, who had a black patch over her right eye. She held a sword in the river, but at the same time conjured another one. As it turned out, it was the power of the head of the Flying Tiger sect. People shouted at the top of their voices that she took care of the rear groups. They thanked her along the way and waved their hands at her. The main character got to his feet and cast a glance in that direction. He whispered his thanks and waved his right hand, pulling a soft smile. In response, the heroine with long hair and an eye patch showed her palm, waving it. It became known that her name was Shin Soa. The girl came from the tertiary divine class, and she was also the head of the Flying Tiger sect. Suddenly, the action began to describe falling objects. This caught Shin Soa's attention, making her tense up. Then some strange, terrifying sounds were heard. From below, people asked questions to their boss. They were interested in what it was, and didn't they still have a long way to go before they got to the boss. However, after a short period of time, a huge monster appeared on the horizon. It had huge horns, fangs, and a trunk. The monster opened its mouth, growling and raising streams of air, which formed a wind. The creature moved on massive clawed paws. Someone was horrified, making the assumption that this, similar to the words with the red mane, the monster was the boss. Then the following order was received. The fire-type hunters should have moved into battle. The story focused on the fiery red eyes of the monster. They seemed hypnotic, and there was a scar on the trunk. The monster opened its mouth, when suddenly a blue glow appeared in front of it in the form of a high column of light. Then blood appeared and dust rose. There was a wind. Its gust was so strong that the characters had to close their eyes, thus protecting them from dirt. Nothing was visible for a while. However, later it became clear to readers that the trunk of a huge monster was bleeding. Suddenly, the episode began to describe the silhouette of some girl with long hair. There was a bright pink glow around her, which instantly changed to blue. The mysterious heroine asked a question in a demanding tone of voice. It became known that she was interested in where Seo Gangram was. She had blonde hair and bright eyes. The girl walked confidently through the clouds of smoke. The others looked at her with admiration and some surprise, their mouths agape. Then someone cursed and wondered what was going on. The crowd began to thicken when questions began to appear about who the heroine was. And the man himself, looking down, thought and was surprised that this woman had just killed the boss alone. Moreover, he was looking for reasons why she was looking for him. The girl swung her sword, which caused a bright blue glow to appear, and behind her one could see the body of the defeated monster. She replied that everything was fine. Then the heroine closed her eyes and struck again. Except it wasn't monsters that got it, but people. Before the eyes of readers appeared someone's hand lying on the bare ground. And then the look of the main character, who was surprised by this outcome of events. The mysterious heroine decided to destroy everyone because she assumed that Seo Gangram was among them. The story decided to remind attentive readers of the picture of how a mysterious girl with long blonde hair and glowing eyes delighted the main character by the fact that she had just single-handedly defeated the boss. Moreover, he did not fully understand why this stranger was looking for him. In the next episode, a man hid behind a huge vine with sharp thorns and began to watch her. A light golden glow appeared around him, and in his head at this time a clever thought was born. The guy was thinking whether he should first check the girl with the help of a fate determinant. Suddenly, the story tells how Seo Gangram did it after all. He activated his power, and then it became clear to the audience and to him that the heroine was named Baekyeon. Only she came from the first divine class, and for this simple and obvious reason, her fate was protected. The latest information greatly discouraged the man. His eyes rounded to the impossible. His eyebrows rose in surprise, thus emphasizing the small wrinkles and dark circles under the lower eyelid. The guy, whose face skin was instantly covered with sweat, opened his mouth and thought that he had never seen such a class before. As it turned out, a little later, that the ability of the first divine class was the fact that people who possessed it were able to return to the past with the preservation of their current memories, but it could not be used after death. The man watched as the representatives of the human race continued to gather in a bunch to look at the current situation. He was standing on top of a huge vine and decided that he had to go down there because, in his opinion, the girl came because of some information about him. Then a bright green glow formed around the huge natural structure, which somewhat alerted the guy. As it turned out, the head of the Flying Tiger sect notified the main character to stay in place. Thanks to the mental actions of the man, the audience could get acquainted with the technique of distant whispering. After such a small monologue, the thick vine gradually began to cover the figure of Seo Gangram. Then the thought was divorced in his head, according to which, this was not the place and time where and when he could interfere. The story focused on Shin Soa, a girl with long brown hair and a black patch over her right eye. A green aura appeared around the heroine, which indicated that she was conjuring at the moment. Then, when the girl took a couple of steps in the direction of the uninvited guest, she asked her a question. She was interested in what their new interlocutor wanted. She, in turn, asked the head of the Flying Tiger sect if she was a person under the name Seo Gangram. Baekyeon, with her hands down, looked at the huge vines with sharp thorns moving in her direction. People looked at her from below. However, Shin Soa was not afraid to enter into a dialogue. She gave a clear answer, according to which the main character was a member of her sect, so the mysterious stranger could talk to her. There was confidence on her face. The wind blew her long wavy hair, thus giving a fresh look and a cheerful look. But Baekyeon is up to something. The girl closed her eyes and made it clear that everything was fine. Suddenly, a bright blue glow poured into space, which hurt not monsters, but people. As it turned out, it was a mysterious girl, apparently with dark intentions. She made a swinging motion with her sword and in a menacing tone of voice exclaimed that in that case she would simply destroy everyone. The story focused readers' attention on her face, part of which was covered in blood. Her blue eyes shone ominously against the background of her skin dark with shadow. Baekyeon explained her cruel action by saying that she made an offer to find Seo Gangram among them. Then someone shouted at the top of his voice that he would never forget her. Some activity attracted the mysterious girl, who continued to strike, causing her silhouette to turn red. She raised her eyes, in which you could see a cat's pupil, which made the heroine look like a predator that had tracked down its prey. As it turned out, it was Shin Soa, the head of the Flying Tiger sect. She was angry, you could tell by her burning green eyes. The girl made a swinging motion with her sword, pointing it at her opponent. Suddenly the picture showed the main character. He used his powerful sword to break down the thick vine obstacle while thinking that he was the one this woman was looking for. It was for this simple and obvious reason that the man had to come forward. A dark aura gathered around him, accompanied by small black sparks. Seo Gangram's eyes were pronounced against the background of dark skin, which was hidden by the shadow of a long dark blue bang. He made a snarl and continued to strike, trying to get out of a kind of prison until it was too late. Then the main character abruptly stuck his cold weapon into a tree, which caused fiery sparks. The guy was angry. Moreover, he was trying to convey in a demanding tone to Shin Soa so that she would let him pass. However, the story sharpened readers' attention to what was happening below. Crowds of people rushed in the opposite direction from Baekhyun, calling her a murderer. Despite such a fast movement, the heroine walked smoothly and confidently. Her figure could be seen far away, next to the body of the defeated boss. But the members of the Flying Tiger sect, on the contrary, were scared. There was fear on their faces. Shin Soa joined the battle. She was standing in front of a mysterious girl who was looking for the main character, beating off her strong blows, which were accompanied by magical reflections. However, Baekhyun's facial expressions did not reflect even a drop of advanced. Apparently, she was so victorious. The heroine said out loud that she would leave the others alive if her rival just gave Seo Gangram. That's just the head of the Flying Tiger sect gave a negative answer. She couldn't allow someone to dare to kill someone from her family of some kind. Then she struck again, which the stranger managed to repel. After a short period of time, Baekhyun increased the pressure of her attack. Readers could notice how she made a sharp movement that provoked the appearance of a huge flow of blue energy, which was reflected from the red. Such a magical manipulation caused a wind that raised clouds of smoke and dust. But Shin Soa didn't have time to react. The story describes how she flew several meters away and hit her back against the wall, contributing to the emergence of a small whirlwind gust that demolished even stone structures. The head of the Flying Tiger sect greedily gulped air in order to recover her heavy breathing. She was wounded, readers could tell by her bloody chin. The girl lowered her head so that the expression of her eyes could not be seen because of the long bangs. However, it was clear that she had a very difficult time. Suddenly, in the next episode, the heroine leaned on her back, turning her face to the top. Except her eyes were closed, and her eyebrows were strained from severe pain. She clenched her teeth, baring her teeth in this way, and made a heart-rending sound. Then Baekhyun herself appeared in front of him. The girl took a couple of steps towards her opponent and swung her sword. 3 silhouettes appeared behind the mysterious but rather strong stranger. It was the members of the Flying Tiger sect who were rushing to help Shin Soa. That's why the head shouted. Probably for this simple reason, Baekhyun managed to notice the approaching danger. She turned her head slightly and stared at people with her predatory burning gaze. Without thinking twice, the girl struck, followed by a bright blue trail. And then the blood. The insidious heroine jumped up, thus being in the air, and after a short period of time, although rather instantly, she found herself next to Kang Donghyun. He did not have time to notice how a representative of the first divine class appeared in front of him and tried to deliver a crushing blow. Because as soon as the guy soared up with his hand, he made a sound of defeat. That's just the story still continued to keep readers' attention on the head of the Flying Tiger sect, who was sitting against a stone wall with her head down. A fierce battle was going on around her between her comrades and Baekhyun, who was holding on confidently and expecting a new attack, when suddenly Yang Tihong approached her, whose weapon was presented in the form of iron gloves. The guy appeared as if out of thin air. His speed was so fast that he broke through space. The man wanted to use his glove, but the mysterious girl caught his hand and stopped the attack in this way. Then she said in a menacing tone that Yang Tihong was standing in her way. The picture changed its angle. Now it described how a group of people stopped next to a blue wall, through which they could not pass. Someone shouted out of it for his comrades to get out as soon as possible. He was interested in the question of what they were doing. The narration sharpened the reader's attention to the stranger, who was knocking on the barrier with both hands, which, not yielding to his strength. As it turned out, there was a barrier in this place. Suddenly, the action returns to the girl with long blonde hair. She was heading towards the group that was watching her expectantly. Everyone turned their heads in her direction, watching what would follow next. Then plaintive cries were heard. People were helplessly begging for help. After a certain period of time, the story described the main character. He leaned on his sword and lowered his head, thinking. According to his thoughts, the man had to get out of the so-called prison of vines. However, Baekhyun could now be heard shouting furiously, asking where Seo Gangram was. The guy cut the tree with his edged weapon, and, still not calling his face, came to the conclusion that he had a little more left. Having dealt another blow to the huge vines, the main character began to gulp air greedily, thus trying to restore heavy breathing. And finally everything was ready. He managed to escape. And in the next episode, Seo Gangram was already falling down somewhere. However, the guy did not have time to group up, or, apparently, he fell on his stomach due to the fact that he was exhausted after a long struggle with magical plants, which froze dead, locking him. When the main character leaned on both his hands and raised his head, he saw something terrible. His amber eyes turned red. The guy's bloody face froze, waiting for something. As it turned out, chaos reigned everywhere around him. His once former comrades were lying motionless on the cold ground, which is why it acquired a somewhat purple color. Baekhyun was in front of him. The girl's body was pointed in his direction. Then the action allowed readers to look in profile at the face of the main character, who still hasn't uttered a word from what he saw. His long bangs tried to hide his surprised and horrified look, but his eyes, shining brightly, did not allow this to be done. The mysterious stranger took a step forward. An aura thickened around her, acquiring a dark lilac color. The man was looking around, probably in this way. He was trying to find his friends. At the same time, the main character thought that he had come too late. Now his face had acquired a bluish hue. He opened his mouth and did not make any sounds, as if something did not allow him. The man looked at the place where he was lying. It was in the blood of his comrades. The story describes how the guy clenched his teeth, making a grin. Drops of either sweat or tears flowed down his cheek. But everything could only end with him. Baekhyun had already approached his figure and was looking down at him, crying and thinking that this whole situation was because of him, a simple insect. Then the girl made a guess out loud that the person sitting in front of her was Seo Gangram. Her eyes were filled with anger, and when she wanted to deliver a crushing blow, she was stopped. Thick vines appeared around her, shining with a bright green glow. He rose up from the ground, thus imprisoning her in the dome. To Baekhyun's left, the head of the Flying Tiger sect appeared, shouting at the top of her voice. How could she do such a ruthless thing? The girl seemed to be flying in the direction of her rival, who instantly turned her head in her direction over her left shoulder. Shin So once made it clear to her that she would not allow the ruthless heroine to touch the members of her sect. Then they locked their swords. When the representative of the first divine class glanced at the furious face of the head of the Flying Tiger sect, she said out loud that she did not understand this. After all, if she had only given her Seo Gangram, then everything could have ended differently. Baekhyun's sword shone with a bright blue aura that matched the color of her hair and eyes. Moreover, Shin So would be able to save everyone else. But the latter did not have time to react, as she was dealt a crushing blow. In pain, she bowed her head, probably in order to hide her exhausted appearance, and made it clear that this was the duty of the sect leader she was supposed to protect. Every word was given to her with such difficulty, but the heroine was not going to give up. The last sentence, on the contrary, inspired her. Her green eyes reflected the desire and strength. The girl revealed her magical energy that enveloped her body. She grabbed her opponent's limb with both hands, and then a strong push followed. Suddenly, the action describes the main character, behind whom there was a surge of emerald energy. His facial expressions expressed a kind of bewilderment. Fear froze in his eyes, and his mouth opened from the lack of words and reflected quiet horror. As it turned out, the barrier was removed. According to the narrative, Seo Gangram sat on the cold ground, resting on both hands, and silently watched the fight. Then the episode allowed us to see his amber eyes burning with evil in close-up, on which tears welled up. The main character gave himself up to his thoughts. The following words echoed in his mind. The guy couldn't beat her, he'd be smitten too, because she's here to kill him. Seo Gangram glanced at Baekhyun, around whom a mysterious aura was flaring up with renewed vigor, transmitted to her sword. The girl finished with her opponents and stood proudly among the huge vines. According to the man, he was the only one who had to die. However, everything did not happen as he wished. Then the main character turned his attention and readers to Shin Soa. The girl's body was lying quietly face down on the cold ground. It could seem as if its last warmth was evaporating in the air. Seo Gangram made a bold assumption that she was in the same place as his comrades. It became known that a check of corpses in the area had begun. As soon as the main character read this information, a tear spilled down his right cheek. He didn't understand what was happening and how to react correctly. Then the blue plaque system notified him, asking a question. As it turned out, Seo Gangram made an offer to use the power of stealing fate. After that, the man was transformed. An aura thickened around him, acquiring a dark, mysterious shade. His eyes lit up, making his gaze look like a predatory one. Apparently, some crazy idea was born in the guy's head. After a short period of time, it became known that he had activated his stealing fate power. The story began to explain to readers that now his karma will accumulate when using force. She described how a huge white seal formed around him and the bodies of his comrades. There were small impulses coming from her. Probably for this reason, Baekhyun slightly pulled away. As it turned out, there were currently 421 dead in the area. The next moment, the system asked the main character whose power he wanted to steal. Then readers were allowed to see his facial expressions up close. It was noticeable that the man was worried. He bit his lower lip, thus making a certain grin. Aloud, he made it clear that he wanted each of them 421. There was a glint of madness in his amber eyes. Their light was strongly expressed against the background of dark skin from the shadow. Around his body, small lines of aura sparkled, which were of different colors, including blue and purple. Suddenly, the action revealed his dark silhouette. The guy grabbed his sword and leaned on his left leg, intending to stand up or even join the fight. The story continues its rapid and exciting development, forcing readers to worry about the decisions of the main character. At the moment, there was a check to see if there were any destinies that could be stolen. The narrative describes how the magical aura continued to thicken around Seo Gangram, who stuck his cold weapon into the ground and stared at his rival with an evil expression on his face. Apparently, because of the huge seal, the man's body passed through a multicolored aura. His amber eyes expressed the desire to eliminate Baekhyun, who had harmed his comrades. A thought arose in the guy's head, according to which it all happened because of the person who had the fate of an insect. In the next episode, the system made an explanation. It became known that due to the low magic rank of the main character, only one condition will be met. Then the story focused on his appearance. It might seem as if the man felt unbearable pain. He closed his eyes and furrowed his brows, which made his small wrinkles visible. A slight breeze was blowing his hair, thus giving a casual look. In his head, he asked a question. Seo Gangram wondered how many people died because of this. That's just the system made it clear that due to the massive influx of goals, destinies will be chosen randomly. According to Seo Gangram, they were right. His magic was increased after receiving a portion of the target's magic. He received the ability Budding Brown Flower and then the Hidden Form technique. Episodes surfaced in his head as a stranger addressed the main character, saying that he killed people wherever he went. Next, the system notified him that his resistance to the water attribute had been increased. The mind remembered how Yu Heron invited a man to her in case someone bothered him. However, the character still continued to reproach himself for what had happened. After all, even Yang Tihong believed that there was no one better than Seo Gangram. The guy got the abilities and axe weighing 1,000 pounds and air gate. In his opinion, his fate killed everyone. The main character suddenly grabbed his head, which was filled with various thoughts. His heavy gaze took on a mad look when suddenly drops of blood appeared from his mouth. The system continued to inform him about the new powers, but he no longer listened to it. But suddenly someone turned to him, saying that the guy had a rather interesting fate. Seo Gangram raised his eyes, which were burning, giving him a dangerous look. The main character once again received a new ability. Now it was the woodleaf method. As it turned out, Baekhyun was talking to him. The girl looked down at him and said out loud that it was time to end this. The man kidnapped the fate of 421 people, when all of a sudden he inflicted damage on his rival, at the same time shouting at the top of his voice that it was all her fault. The heroine was somewhat surprised because she was injured. The characters reflected each other's blows, from which the contact of their swords provoked the formation of bright sparks. Each character had his own aura. Baekhyun, as readers could have understood for a long time, had a delicate blue color, and Seo Gangram purple. The man in his head was making plans for the fight, so the thought stuck in his mind that he wouldn't let it end this way. His bright amber eyes reflected the reflections of some madness, which gave him an angry and somewhat frightened appearance. Moreover, the main character was seriously determined to take revenge on this woman before his death. Seo Gangram struck another blow, but the representative of the first divine class managed to repel it, although she had to take a couple of steps back. The reader might even think that both characters were fighting on equal terms. Suddenly, the story lowered the audience that the main character activated first the ability Sword Master, and then Hawkeye. The next episode allowed us to see his amber eyes in close-up. They clearly reflected the silhouette of Baekhyun, who was fighting with such confidence with a man. A magical aura appeared near the top of his face, having a golden hue in the form of smoke. Moreover, the character continued to activate new abilities, thus testing one after another. It was the turn of reflexes. Suddenly, Seo Gangram's speed increased to an unimaginable size, as if he was moving through space. A strong wind was bending around his body, developing both clothes and long dark blue hair. However, apparently, the use of unfamiliar forces to some extent negatively affected the main character, because blood flowed from his nose. The next moment, the guy approached his opponent and turned his back on her. It is made in such a way in order to successfully attack Baekhyun and quickly turn around. As it turned out, the girl did not expect such an unexpected attack, but only thanks to her experience, she did not get caught. Next in line was the Golden Buddha ability, and then rigidity and resistance to pain. The aura of the main character began to take on a completely different look. From light purple, she moved to a bloody burgundy, which mixed with black. Seo Gangram continued to activate his new powers. The story in another episode tells that he decided to test the air gate, and then the man demonstrated it for his rival. And not only, readers also saw it. The guy instantly moved from top to bottom, jumping through the air. But there was something strange. Baekhyun kept up with him. It was as if she had teleported after him, following ridiculously fresh footsteps. Subsequently, Seo Gangram activated the 1,000-pound height axe ability. He raised his sword, the blade of which was slightly broken in several places. His once amber eyes sparkled with a purple color, which gave him a certain crazy look. The man's facial expressions have also changed. She became more violent. It might even seem that a charge similar to an electric one had passed through it. The main character made a swinging motion in an attempt to finally end this fight. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head. As it turned out, Baekhyun was open, and, apparently, Seo Gangram was watching her from somewhere above. The girl was rushing from side to side in an attempt to find her opponent, who suddenly disappeared from the horizon. Then her blue eyes, which spoke of anger and malice, turned to the main character. Only readers could notice how the representative of the first divine class closed her hands, after which a bright charge of the same color as her magic appeared. The girl turned her head over her left shoulder and carefully watched the opponent she managed to track down. Suddenly, the following episode describes how a huge glacier formed in space. Apparently, it arose because of another activated ability of the main character. Readers became aware that it was called the Call of the Ice Thorn. Then the story tells that Seo Gangram had a hard time. The man staggered back slightly and tipped his head over. He was having such a hard time transferring new abilities that his body screamed so much. After all, the audience could notice how blood appeared from his mouth again. Only this time it came with a new force. Then he fell, sprinkling the cold ground with red paint. From a strong push, the man even slipped a little on it. In the next episode, Seo Gangram cursed and banged his fist on the blood trail. He pondered and after a short period of time came to the conclusion that even if he had these abilities, he still did not know how to use them correctly. In his opinion, the man was very lucky because there were those who activated themselves, but there was only one but. The picture sharpened readers' attention to the appearance of Seo Gangram. He closed his teeth, thus making a grin, and strained his eyebrows, which made his already predatory eyes seem dangerous and cruel. The man was lying on the cold ground, covered with blood, face down. Suddenly, he raised his head, following the actions of his opponent, holding a broken sword in his right hand, or rather what was left of it. The thought echoed in his head, according to which the main character could not use his new powers with this body and such weapons. He went on to speculate that even after the guy stole the destinies of 421 people, he still wasn't able to take revenge properly. The next episode began to describe the small pieces of ice that appeared in the air, which looked like careless spearheads. Then the story described that these magical creations froze, forming circles. As it turned out, they were controlled by Baekhyun. The girl raised her sword. She was looking at her opponent and waiting for something. Suddenly, these pieces of ice flew in the direction of Seo Gangram. He used all his muscles to lift his injured and tired body and take shelter from danger. As readers might have noticed to themselves, he managed to do it. But in his head there were thoughts of a completely different nature. The man thought that if he only understood what these skills were capable of. However, he failed to finish his line. Seo Gangram closed his eyes and pursed his lips. A drop of sweat appeared on his face. Readers could only guess what he was thinking. Apparently, he didn't have a plan right now because he was acting on the basis of the situation. When suddenly, the silhouette of Baekhyun, who was standing a few meters away from him, appeared in front of him. An icy aura literally formed around the girl, because readers could notice how huge blocks of ice stood behind her. The guy's amber eyes began to reflect a quiet horror. He froze. The reason was that the main character at the time became confident in himself. He hoped with every fiber of his soul for the end in his favor, because there was one ability that he knew well. Except he was interrupted. The opponent launched her magic weapon at him, hitting his leg. The ice tip seriously injured Seo Gangram. He reproduced a quiet cry and began to get rid of the sharp object. And Baekhyun, in turn, was walking slowly towards the main character. In the next episode, the narration allowed to see his facial expression up close. Deep bags appeared under the amber eyes, although, apparently, these were small wrinkles that became more emphasized due to the fact that the guy strained his eyebrows and forehead from pain. a mysterious girl originating from the first divine class started a dialogue. In her opinion, everything the guy did was pointless. The reason was that Seo Gangram was destined to die. But the man, in turn, was not going to give up. He let out an involuntary cry and freed his left leg from a large piece of ice. Suddenly, huge vines appeared from the ground, around which there was a bright green aura. The main character stood on both feet and put his hands in different directions, thus keeping his balance. In his head, he thought that his understanding was quite enough. Readers could notice how Baekhyun jumped onto a tree that continued to grow and wriggle. This ability was called the wood leaf method. Vines with sharp thorns continued to attack the girl, which made her somewhat surprised. Her eyes were wide open, making it easier for her to follow the danger that had arisen. She used her sword to fight the growing threat. Now readers could get into the head of a representative of the first divine class. Episodes from past fights appeared in her mind. Then she jumped down and thought that compared to the previous experience, the girl decided that the man was a swordsman. In her opinion, Seo Gangram was pretty well versed in spells. Once again, the heroine made a swinging motion, followed by a long blue light. However, not a single muscle on her face twitched. Baekhyun was still serious. That's just, in any case, spells like this, the wood leaf method. The girl did not finish her remark, because she was busy eliminating the vines that appeared, which seemed to have no end. With a couple of strokes, she managed to cut a few dozen trees that were moving in her direction, trying to overtake the mysterious heroine and hide her in a kind of prison. The representative of the first divine level was firmly convinced that it would be difficult for Seo Gangram to maintain this for a long time. After destroying another vine, the girl looked down and directed her left hand there. She did it to maintain balance. That's just attentive viewers could notice how someone's hand was hiding behind the rest of the tree. In the next episode, the silhouette of the main character suddenly appeared. His figure was rapidly moving towards his opponent from the back. While she was fighting off the emerging threat, Seo Gangram appeared behind her, holding her ice tip in his left hand. Madness shone in the guy's eyes. He looked like a predator that was about to overtake its prey. The strong wind blew his hair, which made him look even more careless. Then the story directed the reader's attention in close-up to the expression of Baekhyun's facial expressions. She lowered her faded blue eyes and looked at her body, which was splattered with drops of blood. Her drops of blood. In the next episode, it was clearly shown how the main character managed to deliver a crushing blow, thus stopping his rival. As it might seem, Seo Gangram was somewhat worried. Readers could tell by the look on his face. The man was looking at the red marks from his blow, which were moving to his left. Then he took a stronger grip on the ice tip, which the story focused the attention of the audience, who were waiting with tension for the outcome of the battle of the two characters. Suddenly, the story described a smile that quickly appeared on the guy's face. It was more like a grin. Apparently, he was pleased with the outcome of events. Baekhyun's body began to fall, and in his head, the main character was thinking about the fact that he managed to deliver a crushing blow and defeat a representative of the first divine class. In his opinion, he had achieved his revenge. Seo Gangram, like his former opponent, was picking up speed, rushing to the ground. He was flying down with his back to the place where Baekhyun was already lying down. The next line echoed in his mind, when the main character found himself on the body of his rival, who was lying on the bloody cold ground. He thought he could avenge the murder. His tired eyes burned with joy and a desire to live. The man pulled a victorious smile from ear to ear and looked to the left. It's over. That's just in the next episode. He coughed up blood, which is why he had to stand up a little in order not to choke. As the story went, he activated the ability Regeneration. However, Seo Gangram gave the order not to do this. He lowered his head and started holding his stomach with his right hand. And the next moment, the activation of the ability was cancelled. A question was heard in his head, according to which the guy wanted to know what the meaning was. Now there were tears in his eyes. It was hard not to notice them on the blood-stained face, which was decorated with bruises under the eyes. The man was smiling a bitter smile. In his opinion, nothing will change in any case. In the new episode, readers had the opportunity to take a look at the space in which Seo Gangram was located. It was completely destroyed. The remains of destroyed vines were scattered everywhere. Also, the earth was sprinkled with drops of red paint in the bodies of the main character's comrades. Everything began to gradually acquire a black hue. According to the character, then and now, nothing else has changed. The guy indulged in his memories, starting from his childhood. A small boy with huge eyes appeared before the eyes of readers, which gave the hero a defenseless appearance. There were two silhouettes next to him, one of which was gently hugging the character. Someone turned to the young Seo Gangram, trying to convey to him that his fate was replete with perseverance and death. Moreover, he was predicted that the boy would lose his parents at a fairly young age, and his life would be full of misfortunes. All these terrible words were spoken by a man whose face could not be distinguished by readers. This character wore a traditional Oriental costume. As he said, the main character really lost his parents before he even matured. And because he got into various accidents, everyone around him put the brand of a loser on him. Seo Gangram remembered everyone who had somehow come into contact with him and somehow suffered. The first was a girl with long hair. Her eye and neck were injured. The second was a character with a long scythe, turned his back to the audience. The man was firmly convinced that he was destined to be weak and doomed to misfortune. However, there were people who, despite everything, managed to influence him. Among them were Yang Tihong, Yu Heron, Shin Su and Kang Donghyun. Except they died because of him. At this moment, Seo Gangram was sitting with his head down alone in a space filled with chaos and disorder. The corpses of his comrades lay around him. In the following episode, the main character again indulged in his thoughts. According to them, if he had only started by searching for Baekhyun, if only he had died first. Suddenly, his gaze changed, taking on a somewhat intimidating appearance because his pupil became elongated. Seo Gangram turned into a beast. It was even visible behind the covered face, which he hid with his right bloody hand. If he had done that, he would have been fine. That's what the character kept thinking about. The main character was eager to rewind time. The story focused on his closed eyes, which expressed fatigue. Suddenly, a brilliant idea came to his mind. He turned over his right shoulder and looked down somewhere. The following episode informed readers that the regression ability, which belonged to the first divine class, allowed a person to return to the past while retaining their memories, but only the ability cannot be used in case of death. The main character has activated the Stealing Destiny ability. His amber eyes lit up even brighter. The aura around him acquired a radiant light. In the next episode, the story informed readers that the man had received the power of regression. Seo Gangram didn't know where he would return to. He remembered his comrades, Yang Tihun, Yu Heron, who supported him when he was feeling bad at some moments. Then the episode when they fought on the vines appeared in his head. Now the main character has activated his new ability. In his opinion, even if it happens right before his meeting with Bae Yong, he will accept it with a pure soul. It was for this simple and obvious reason that he begged and begged. Suddenly, a golden glow appeared in front of him, and the system informed that the force would be activated any minute. The next moment, the picture focused the reader's attention on the left hand of Seo Gangram. The main character leaned on a table, sitting on a green sofa. He was in a spacious room when he suddenly came to his senses and thought about what was happening. His surprised eyes began to look around and study the objects around him. Suddenly someone greeted him. This character was next to him in order to read his horoscope. The main character raised his head up, which caused his expression to become surprised, rather even discouraged. Both of his hands began to tremble, and the tablet he was holding moved to his forehead, thus hiding his closed eyes. The man said hello. As it turned out, he saw a girl with long dark hair pulled into a low ponytail and green eyes. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked somewhere to the side. In front of her was the silhouette of some stranger waving his hand. However, history did not focus on him. Seo Gangram is back. The story continues its rapid development. This time she tells how the main character was approached by a man who pulled a smile from ear to ear. He had brown hair pulled back. Aloud, he said in a joyful tone that they were finally at their first gathering. Moreover, the stranger hoped to see how well they suited each other. To his left sat a girl with long brown hair pulled into a low ponytail. She pulled away from her neighbor and turned the body in the opposite direction from him. The painting emphasized her face. Close-up readers could see her green eyes, which were directed to the left corner without much interest. In his mind, Seo Gangram made a remark that she was not wearing a bandage. He was watching her from under the planchette, like a child watching a candy. The sunlight illuminated his head, thus giving a cozy and cute look. The guy was really glad to be back. Moreover, the girl sitting in front of him is Shin Soa. She didn't die and didn't lose her eye. Suddenly, the guy removed the tablet, revealing a view of his facial expressions. Seo Gangram replied that it was all like that. Mentally, he came to the conclusion that the man could no longer allow such a thing to happen again. The main character turned to the others in the room and made them understand, indicating that they could write their name, date and time of birth on a white piece of paper handed to them. The stranger pulled a smile from ear to ear again and stretched out his left hand, handing it over. But, as Seo Gangram might have noticed, Shin Soa felt uncomfortable. Apparently, he made such a conclusion because the girl took a deep breath, but this did not prevent her from taking a black pen and writing the required information. The main character refreshed in his memory her image with a black patch on her right eye, at a time when she was dissatisfied with something. In his thoughts, the character reflected on the fact that now that he was thinking about it, she did mention that a little earlier she had to get involved with a strange guy. And the next moment, Seo Gangram wanted to make Shin Soa know about it in advance. In the new episode, the man asked the couple to let him see their compatibility, and those, in turn, sat quietly and watched him. Initially, the story focused readers' attention on a man whose horoscope showed that he belonged to the type of pure gold, which made the man's face shine even brighter. But Shin Soa belonged to the pure tree type. A light aura formed around her, taking on the appearance of trees and plants. She put her left hand on the armrest and listened attentively to the speaker. That's just how the main character said. In the horoscope, this is called a tree felled with gold. The story began to tell how a mysterious faceless man, who held an axe with both hands, was preparing to cut down a tree. It was a terrible compatibility, because edged weapons harmed nature. At this point, CEO Gangram pulled a smile from ear to ear, and showed his clients a tablet with drawings. An innocent aura shone around him. That's just his words really made the man and Shin Soa think. The first one closed his eyebrows, which made his wrinkles better, and the girl just covered her mouth with her hand. The heroine finally entered the dialogue, who shone more than ever and said out loud that everything looked like the truth. She was convinced that they had no choice, for the simple and obvious reason that their compatibility was terrible. After that, the shadow hid her neighbor's face. Apparently, he didn't like the situation that came out the wrong way. He screamed at the top of his voice, asking a question, according to which, what nonsense was the main character saying, referring to the fact that it was complete nonsense. Now he was bursting with rage. Even the aura around him had taken on a terrifying dark hue. The man asked where the owner was. As it turned out, he was right at the table. Seo Gangram raised his right hand, thus indicating himself, and the stranger, in turn, stood on both feet and rested his hands on the table. He was taken by surprise. In the next episode, an ill-mannered guy called out to Shin Soa and in a demanding tone of voice asked her to leave, referring to the fact that her boyfriend could not trust this guy. That's just the girl shone even brighter in her face. She exclaimed that she would like to be told her fate, because she considered Seo Gangram a rather pleasant companion. Suddenly the stranger blushed. He stumbled out to convey to the heroine that she would regret the choice she had made. In his opinion, the reason was obvious. Shin Soa would never be able to meet such a great guy like himself. However, readers could see how her expression became more serious. At the next moment, she made the audacious assumption that it seemed like someone like her had no intentions of dating him, and then she pointed him to the exit. Why, he turned red like a tomato. The man was shaking with anger, and then shouted at the top of his voice that Shin Soa Ryo should come back to him. The stranger disappeared behind the door, ostentatiously slamming it. Even the girl watched him leave. Afterwards, she said that she thought that in places like this, they only mention the good things in life. The main character's face took on a somewhat confused look, as if he was hiding something. Seo Gangram raised his eyes, looked up to the right, pursed his lips and mentally came to the conclusion that this was usually the case. Shin Soa turned into a man and made the assumption that her interlocutor was good at it, and then she asked him a question. She was interested in the fact whether she could get a fortune prediction. Subsequently, the girl received a positive response. Suddenly, the main character felt something. It might have seemed as if he had been hit by a charge or that something had come to his mind. Blue energy appeared around him, accompanied by bright sparks of blue and white. In the next episode, the picture described that the room in which Seo Gangram and Shin Soa were located had acquired the same shade. As it became known after a short period of time, the indicators of the main character were calculated based on his fate. Mentally, the man thought that, although he had expected this, there was little he could do about this ringing and dizziness. Seo Gangram grabbed his head and twisted his facial expressions, which caused him to have a painful appearance. Someone asked what he was doing. It was Shin Soa. She screamed at the top of her voice, trying to reach the man in this way so that he would get under the table as soon as possible. The girl knocked on the table with her right hand, and then pulled it. The thought settled in his mind that in his past life, the future head of the Flying Tiger sect had always protected him as well. Only now he needed to concentrate, because hadn't he said a little earlier that he was going to change the future? In the next episode, Seo Gangram and Shin Soa ended up under the table. After some time, the story focused readers' attention on the girl's facial expression. It might have seemed that she was nervous to some extent, because a small drop of sweat rolled down her cheek. She asked a question, according to which she was interested in information, what kind of announcement it was about fate and some indicators. Suddenly, the main character got to his feet and approached the door. When he almost disappeared, the heroine screamed again behind his back, who asked him to wait for her. That's just mentally the guy came to the conclusion that it would be better if he did not contact Shin Soa. He looked around the place, it looks like a cafe, and took a couple of steps forward. Seo Gangram hoped that there was something decent there that could be useful for him to use. He turned his head over his left shoulder when suddenly he found something. From this thought, his expression became several times more cheerful. He then reached out with his right hand, but suddenly Shin Soa appeared behind him, who startled him with her sudden question. The heroine wondered where he was going, but readers may have noticed how the man hid something in the inside pocket of his jacket. The girl grabbed him by the sleeve and dragged him to the side, at the same time saying that they had to evacuate. However, he, in turn, shouted at her to wait. When the couple approached the door, they heard some kind of scream. Suddenly, a group of people formed in front of them, who were plaintively shouting about the approach of monsters, at the same time notifying everyone to flee. Shin Soa stopped and made a surprised face. The picture focused readers' attention on the guy who demanded that the creatures did not approach him and did not touch him. However, before he could react, he was bitten by one of them. The monster bit harder into his leg. When the girl saw this terrible sight, she asked him to wait, because she could not help him. However, she was interrupted by the main character, who made a swinging movement, thanks to which he managed to get rid of the monster, which caused green liquid to pour in different directions. A slight smile appeared on the guy's face, and mentally he made sure of the truthfulness of his assumptions that they were going to appear soon. The narration allowed readers to take a close-up look at these creatures. They looked like giant gray caterpillars with red button eyes. An evil purple aura shone around him. One of the monsters lifted the upper part of the body from bare and opened its mouth. The story informed both the audience and the main character that it was a giant worm, whose rank was awarded to the third class of insects. The creature, although it usually ate grass, but it could also eat animals and people. Seo Gangram shouted an order at the top of his voice for everyone to run to safety. He quickly rushed in the direction from which people and, in fact, giant worms appeared. The man used a small dagger to counterattack. Having made another blow, the main character inflicted a crushing defeat on another monster, after which only green slime remained. The guy fought with giant worms without a shadow of fear, grabbing those by the body with his bare hands. It was as if it was transmitted in space. There was only one left. The guy mentally exclaimed that he was the last. His face expressed rigidity. Seo Gangram furrowed his eyebrows, which made the small wrinkles under the amber-colored eyes more accentuated. His teeth closed, making a snarl. Thus, his facial expressions wore a serious and tense expression. But he was interrupted by someone's screams. Someone behind him was shouting at the top of his voice, calling for help. The main character turned his head over his right shoulder and alerted his gaze, somewhat surprised that there were more monsters there, because it seemed to him that he had coped with all of them. The guy with a rapid speed went behind the wall, from where the noise was heard. He made it clear to the stranger that if he didn't want to die, then he should grab onto something, because these insects weren't that strong. However, when he appeared closer to the source of the screams, the man was pretty much set up. Something caught him by surprise, because readers could see how his expression took on a dumbfounded appearance. His amber-colored eyes froze in surprise, a small drop of sweat rolled over his skin, and his lips were completely closed. After a short period of time, a new episode informed readers about how some girl in a red long skirt was holding a fire extinguisher in both hands. As it turned out, she used it to eliminate the emerging threat in the form of a giant worm. The people surrounding the heroine were watching her closely, and the so-called improvised weapon was covered with green slime. It was Shin Soa. The girl raised her head and pulled a happy smile from ear to ear. She said her thoughts aloud, according to which the monsters did not really seem, because she also managed to defeat one. The surrounding people asked a question in unison, making sure that this fragile Shin Soa had eliminated the giant worm on her own. But the main character, in turn, laughed. He was genuinely happy for the future head of the Flying Tiger sect. Seo Gangram closed his eyes and replied that nothing had happened when the girl asked him about it. As it turned out, the man was betrayed by his own thoughts. A remark rang out in his mind, according to which the main character found it funny to see someone capable of killing dragons rejoicing in something like this. The story focused readers' attention first on Seo Gangram, who addressed a group of people, informing her that the stairs were now free. He pointed at her with his left hand in a gesture for them to start moving in her direction. The man continued talking, trying to convey to them that they would need to get down before more monsters came running. And then the picture wanted the audience to look at Shin Soa, who continued to stand aside and hold a fire extinguisher with both hands. While all the people were trying to reach the stairs at a fast pace, she silently watched them. In the next episode, they thanked the main character and rushed to run as far as possible from a dangerous place that had recently been teeming with creatures. Seo Gangram squatted down and put away his dagger. His bright eyes were relaxed, and in the next moment, the guy gave himself up to his thoughts. As it turned out, in his head he came to the conclusion that while there was an opportunity, he needed to collect the spheres of souls. Next, the guy lowered his hands inside the monster, which caused the green slime, apparently an analog of blood, to come out. That's just the man managed to get small dark balls. Moreover, there were not a couple of them. Of course, they were low level, but it was a little more than Seo Gangram expected to get. The spheres looked somewhat like black pearls shining from the blue light in the room. Suddenly he was interrupted. Shin Soa turned to the main character, asking him a question. After a short period of time, it became clear to readers that the girl was interested in why he did not go down the stairs. She was standing in the middle of the corridor, putting a fire extinguisher next to her, and pointed in the direction of the exit. Such an unexpected appearance took Seo Gangram by surprise. The audience could see this by the surprised expression on his face and a quick wave of his left hand, in which he held the spheres. With this movement, he got rid of the green slime, and a second later put the purchased items in the left pocket of his jacket. The man asked her a counter question. He was curious about the reason why the heroine had not yet evacuated, to which she replied with a convincing tone that she couldn't leave Seo Gangram alone. Shin Soa took a deep breath and looked at her interlocutor. Her green eyes were pronounced against the background of dark skin from the shadow. The girl crossed her arms over her chest and began to listen attentively to the man who at that moment asked her if she was worried about someone she met just today. Apparently, the main character wanted to either distract her with this question or embarrass her. But he didn't succeed, because Shin Soa gave a positive answer in a calm tone of voice. However, Seo Gangram, in turn, continued thinking out loud. In the next episode, he again asked her a question, according to which the girl acted in this way, even if she did not know what else could happen. On its background lay the bodies of the defeated animals, which were on the green slime sprinkling the cold floor, and mentally the man came to the conclusion that his old acquaintance remained the same. He gave her his left hand, but she was about to say something about that being why they should. But they didn't let her finish. Seo Gangram interrupted her by calling her name. The main character mentally decided for himself that for this simple and obvious reason he needed to tell Shin Soa about something. In the next episode, the guy made it clear to her that they had something to talk about. His expression became more serious. Bright amber eyes were clearly visible against the background of dark skin from the shadow. His pupils were like a cat's, as if he was a predator that was hunting for its prey. In the next chapter, the guy turned to his interlocutor because he needed to tell her something. The girl looked at him and asked about what. Seo Gangram said out loud that Shin Soa's name referred to the third dragon stage. However, the girl interrupted him, asked him what he was going to do. The guy kept talking. This time, he replied that her attribute was a tree, and she had abilities with the name Woodleaf Method. A brown sign appeared in front of Shin Soa. Then he asked her if the window of fate had opened. The heroine was surprised because she saw something. The subject showed something about an ability called the Woodleaf Method. Suddenly he asked her if she would fill out the ad they had heard in the room. So it meant that they all received unusual powers. In his head, he was thinking that since they had awakened, they should not die until they met it. The man looked into his phone, turning on the flashlight function. Now Seo Gangram offered to come down. Shin Soa asked him a question, according to which she was interested in what type of fate her interlocutor had. To which he replied that it would be better if they did not tell each other about the contents of their windows of fate, for the reason that others could see it. The girl gave a positive answer. The window of the main character's fate is the same as 5 years ago. It looks like he doesn't have the abilities he stole before his regression. Only one thing looked different. Currently, the guy has accumulated a huge amount of karma. This was probably the result of the theft of the destinies of 421 people. If Seo Gangram wanted to change the future, then he needed to use the stealing fate ability, but getting more karma now was dangerous. Karma accumulated when committing serious crimes, like murder or when using special skills. If too much karma accumulated, then the goal went beyond the border. The pair continued to move, and in his head, the man said that everyone who crossed the border suffered. However, Shin Soa replied out loud that they were not alone. A mysterious silhouette of a man fell in front of their eyes. The girl ran in his direction and shouted that they would help them get out of there. However, there was a giant worm behind him, which the main character managed to eliminate. It was lucky that he was the only one here. The easiest way to check whether he is alive or not is to activate the Stealing Fate ability. As it turned out, the current number of people killed was 1. In his head, Seo Gangram was thinking about what looked like they had decent abilities. If they had awakened, they would have been able to survive. The guy decided to use the new power of fire control, earning karma. They were perfect. Moreover, according to the man, they would be useful to him. Suddenly Shin Soa started running, shouting that something was happening. The stranger attacked the giant worms, saying that it was so easy because it was a tutorial. Moreover, he was ready to go out to the boss right now. However, he noticed something. In the next episode, the man was surprised when he saw the survivors. He then asked the characters if there was anyone among them willing to ally with him. It became known that his name was Doc Gajan, but Seo Gangram mentally understood where this guy started from. He introduced himself. The new character asked the heroine's name, to which she also called him. Doc Gajan promised to memorize them, and now that the current event was over, it was going to start soon. However, the main characters did not understand what exactly. The man asked in them if most of the introductions in the games are not based on a certain formula. He belonged to the 3rd divine level, having the attribute of gold and the ability of a dreamer. In any case, as Seo Gangram reflected, Doc Gajan would soon become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. He was capable of such amazing things even before he was awakened. The guy gave them a choice. Either they defeat the boss with allies, or they acquire a strong ally in the middle of the battle. He then patted the protagonist on the shoulder and asked if his awakening power was due to the sacrifice of an ally, which greatly surprised both of them. Seo Gangram knew that the man was a famous web novelist, but he was quite strange. Suddenly, something caught their attention. Someone asked for help. A huge worm of the first class of insects appeared. The stranger slipped and fell. Suddenly, the picture showed Shin Soa's face, who was scared. Doc Gajan then suggested that he was like the boss from the prologue that they had to defeat. Only the girl was convinced that they had to run. The main character joined the battle. He used fire magic that he could definitely rely on. The man asked him if he was sure he could kill the monster. However, I received a negative response. At the moment, they won't be able to handle this creature. Now Seo Gangram has enveloped him in flames, so they didn't let him finish. The worm became more ferocious. The main character shouted for his comrades to run, which they did, and he realized that his attacks would not work. Shin Soa called out to her friend to hurry up to them, but Doc Gajan ordered her not to slow down, grabbing her by the arm. The worm was in front of the main character, ready to make an attacking move. Suddenly, the aura around Seo Gangram acquired a mysterious purple color, like his native magic. Graduates gathered near the school. The guys took pictures, rejoiced at graduation from high school. Han Diesung was walking with his friend. Suddenly, his body lit up with a blue light, and his soul separated from his body. On this ordinary day, the young man fell into hell. There was no day or night, not even sunlight. The guy had been in hell for about 10 days and it was hard to survive. All that could be eaten was the rotting meat left behind by the monsters. Diesung found the remains of the animal and began to eat it. A large green creature appeared behind him and was about to attack. The young man managed to react to the appearance of the monster, so he jumped away from him and launched the first stone at the monster. He continued to fight back with stones and the creature escaped. As the days passed, Diesung had to give up his humanity in order to survive. He was able to learn to exist in hell. 51 days have passed since the guy appeared in this place. The young man was sitting in a cave and roasting meat on a fire. A notification from the system appeared in front of him, which said that the player's level had been raised to the 3rd level. Thinking that he had gone crazy, Diesung still accepted the notification. After that, his abilities increased noticeably. 7 years later, the young man has upgraded his level and skills. He learned how to fight monsters and most of the worms died from a single blow. It's been a long time since that day. At the age of 24, Diesung was able to make a sword from the ore obtained from the Steel Knight. With this sword, 51 years later, the young man beheaded a pathetic reincarnation. In 79, Diesung went to the Demon King, the one who dragged the guy to hell. There was chaos all around. Wounded monsters lay everywhere. Everything was on fire. Diesung was fighting with the creatures when the Demon King's gatekeeper appeared in front of him. This creature was several times bigger than the guy, but he does not intend to give up. Diesung held his sword out in front of him and told the monster to open the gate if he wanted to survive. Calling the young man an arrogant fool, the gatekeeper of the Demon King strikes and throws Diesung forward a few meters. The young man does not give up. He gets up from the ground and flies to attack. Striking a blow, the guy flies away from the creature. The system says that it was necessary to kill him immediately. Diesung watches the monster's further actions and he becomes enraged. The gatekeeper says that he will not leave it just like that and will strike back. Having said this, the monster falls silent and a through hole appears in his chest. Diesung launched his sword at him, so he was able to defeat the monster. The creature falls to the ground, and the system says that now the Demon King will definitely get angry, because the young man even killed the guardian of the gate. The guy shrugs off these words and grins, saying that he understands the whole situation. The system decides to ask Diesung if he is sure that he wants to kill the Demon King and become the absolute ruler of hell. The guy replies that he is not interested, and the skull asks why then he is fighting against the Demon King. Diesung replies that it's been 80 years since he went to hell. He fought monsters to survive. They were all serious and all have different stories and reasons why they got into this hell. Therefore, Diesung has a question. Why is he in this hell, and why did the Demon King bring him to this hell? The skull, upon hearing this, suggests that he could have asked the Demon King politely about it. Also, the skull advises Diesung on his knees to ask for forgiveness. Thinking that questions are all the young man wants, the system asks what he is going to do. Diesung replies that the price must be paid. The price for dragging a young man into hell and making him suffer. The guy stands in front of the Demon King's castle and prepares to go there to punish him for everything. Diesung takes off, but before he can reach the king, he wakes up in a hospital room. Diesung doesn't understand why he ended up in the hospital and tries to move. His body does not move, and the young man is very scared of this. His mother comes into the ward with a tray in her hands and, seeing her son awake, drops the tray on the floor. The woman runs up to her son and starts hugging him, and the young man does not understand why the dream is so realistic. Then Diesung remembers how he killed the Demon King. That day, the skull told the young man that he was now the absolute ruler of hell, and after these words, a notification from the system appeared. The sign said if Diesung was ready to return to Earth. The young man wondered if he was ready to return to Earth, because 80 years have passed since he went to hell. Every day he prayed to be free of this cursed place. Therefore, the guy agrees without a doubt. The doctors gathered at Han Diesung's bedside to check on the patient's condition. After an examination, the doctor says that the young man has been in a vegetative state for a long time, so at first it will be difficult for him to start moving. But the doctor reassures the patient's mother, saying that if he continues to receive rehabilitation treatment, he will get better. Unexpectedly for everyone, Diesung starts screaming heart-rendingly. The young man does not understand when he moved into reality when he received a notification from the system. The children who are in the ward with Diesung are frightened by the behavior of the young man and cling to their mother. The doctor runs up to the patient to calm him down. But the guy does not intend to get help, so he bites the doctor's hand until it bleeds. The young man asks the doctor what he did to him, whether it was magic or a paralyzing poison. The guy falls out of bed and continues to shout that he has lived 80 years of struggle and suffering, so he does not intend to die peacefully after all he has experienced. Even when he was dying in the lifeless land of hell, he begged and begged. Two orderlies run into the ward and grab the guy from both sides under the arms. The young man tries to escape and threatens violence. Suddenly, a yellow light catches his attention and Diesung looks out the window. He looks up at the sky and does not understand why there is a wormhole here. They put Diesung on the bed, and the orderlies hold him so that the young man does not run away again. The guy tries to get rid of someone else's hands, but a drug is injected into his neck. Diesung's body has gone limp, and he is falling asleep. A man on the news announces that at about 9 o'clock in the morning over Songpaku, in Seoul, the gate was opened. A team of hunters who were responsible for those surroundings was quickly dispatched to the scene. The street was in chaos. Everywhere lay the bodies of monsters, fragments of buildings. Hunters fought with creatures. The news anchor appeals to the hunters to report on the situation on the streets of Seoul. One of the hunters tells the head that the mission is currently in the final stage of suppression. Under these words, the man plunges a sword into the monster's head. The head asks how long the operation can take. The man replies that, judging by the success of the mission, it may take only an hour. The head is responsible so that after the completion of the mission, he is informed about it. The man will take care of the rest himself. The main thing is that the hunters complete the mission successfully. The hunter accepts the order, and the head puts the phone in the inside pocket of his jacket. The news anchor announces that thanks to the prompt response of the hunter team, the consequences of the gate were quickly eliminated, and then the gate itself was closed. Han Diesung opened his eyes and the first thought that crossed his mind was a wormhole. He thought about the fact that there was a team of hunters in it. The head of the hunters enters the chamber and greets the young man. Diesung doesn't recognize the man, but after looking at the man's face, he recognized him as Chang Ho. The man asks the patient about his well-being, and the man replies that he is alright. Jang Ho rejoices that Diesung has finally come to his senses after 10 long years after Ima fell then. Hearing this, Diesung remembers that very day, graduation from high school. Chang Ho says that on that day the young man was full of strength and energy, but suddenly fell, and since then he has been lying in a coma in a hospital bed for 10 years. Thoughts appeared in Diesung's head that while he was in hell, it seemed to him that all 80 years had passed, but in reality only 10 years had passed. Young Ho says that during all this time, his mother worked very hard. Due to hospital expenses, she had to get 2 jobs. But Young Ho is in a hurry to calm his friend down, saying that the most important thing now is for Diesung to recover as soon as possible and return to his former form. Also, the head of Hunters reports that the patient cannot worry about work. Chang Ho left him one free place. Diesung and his mom went out for a walk. The woman was taking her son on a gurney and talking about the good weather. The man practically did not listen to her. He was thinking about what was happening to him while he was in hell. There he fought for a chance to return to his body and survive. But here, he has to take responsibility for his family and help. But at the moment, he can't walk on his own, and it can bring a lot of trouble. And also Diesung can become a heavy burden for the family. When the man concluded that in reality there is no less cruelty than in hell, 2 men appear in front of them. One of them had a scar on half of his face, and the other turned to Diesung's mom, calling her auntie. The man with the scar asks the woman why they couldn't get through to her. Is she not going to return the money she borrowed? Mom begins to tremble with fear and says that by next month she will prepare the money. The man replies that the woman tells him about it every month and he is tired of listening to these promises. The woman approaches the bandit and taking his hand begins to beg him to give her another month, and this time she will definitely prepare the money. The man did not like this gesture. He violently pulls out his hand and shouts that she should not touch him. He tells the son's mom that if she borrowed money, she needs to return it on time. The bandit added that this time they would not talk to her in a good way. Tears accumulate in mom's eyes, and she asks not to do this in front of her child. She makes a promise that in the next one she will definitely return the required amount and asks them to let them go. The collector points to the hand, depicting that there is little time left. 2 years have passed, and the woman still has not repaid the debt. Deciding that if he hits her, the woman will listen to him, the man hits her in the face. Seeing this, Han Diesung becomes enraged, calling the 2 men a brat. Collectors grin, and mom asks her son not to say so. A man with a scar on his face walks up to Diesung and grabs him by the neck, lifting him off the ground. Mom cries and asks her son to apologize to the men. The woman says that her son is not to blame for this situation, because he is a simple patient, so the mother asks the man to let the young man go. The collector does not agree with these words, because all the money went to the treatment of Diesung. The young man grins and asks what they are going to do to him in this case, calling them insects. A grin appears on the bandit's face. He calls the guy impudent and says that he has big problems with his head, since Diesung decided to continue to get into the conflict. The man also says that Diesung really looks like an insect from them. After all, at the moment he is not able to walk, only move his mouth helplessly. Having said that, the collector throws the young man to the ground, and he flies away a few meters. The man approaches the patient and continues to strike. When the thought comes to the young man's head that if they were in hell now, he could quickly deal with him, a notification from the system appears. The sign says that the divine quest is about to begin and an offer to join it. The words were written below that in case of refusal of the quest, the reward will not be received. After the window with the choice suddenly appeared, Diesung's doubts were short-lived. After all, these windows were the only thing that helped him survive all these 80 years in hell. All the people around the young man froze and the world turned gray. The young man understands that this happened because he received a task. A notification from the system appears in front of him again, in which detailed information about the task is written. In one of the items it was written about the reward. For a successfully completed task, the young man will receive a medicine to restore the perfect state. A red triangle appears in front of Diesung with the inscription 10 meters at the top. The guy realizes that if he gets to the object, he will receive a reward. He decides that he will get there even by crawling, if only he will be returned to his former state. The guy starts to crawl on the ground, but it's hard for him. Diesung believes that he can't handle such a small thing when he conquered everyone in hell. At this speed, it is impossible to get to the triangle in the allotted time. The patient understands. He looks up at the message from the system and sees that there are 17 minutes left before the task is completed. Diesung decides to think rationally and, after reading the line on which the goal was written, to get to the destination. The young man understands that it is not necessary to reach the subject. It is important to move in any way. The patient begins to examine the objects that surrounded him and sees the stroller on which his mother was taking him. He crawls to the gurney and starts climbing on it. It's hard for the young man, but he was able to get on the wheelchair. In the last seconds, Diesung gets to the red triangle and a potion drops out to him. Immediately after the young man drank the medicine, all his strength returned to him and the pain disappeared. The next second, the world stops being gray and people come to life. A man with a scar looks around in an attempt to find a young man. Security guards come to the scene to stop the criminals. Mom notices her son and runs to him to find out how the young man feels. The collector looks angrily in the direction of Diesung, and the other asks him to leave here. The sun has already set over the horizon, and Diesung is talking about that window with a choice. He tried to summon him again several times, but there were no results, so the young man decided to give up. While the patient is lying on the bed, the realization comes to him that he needs to restore his body as soon as possible before those collectors come again. When Diesung decides to create a quest for himself, a notification appears stating that the pantheon is expecting a visit from perfection. The young man's eyes widen. He does not understand what it was. Meanwhile, the guy is transferred to the pantheon and a notification from the system appears in front of him again. The message says that a virtual avatar was created based on the information in the diaries. From this moment on, it is possible to accelerate its implementation by completing tasks. When the young man realized that what was happening was not like a dream, information about a new task appeared in front of him. Diesung needs to destroy the facility. For the completed task, he will receive a memory card for perfection. A huge blue head with protruding fangs from its mouth appears near the young man. Diesung exhales deeply and strikes, thereby destroying the specified object. After that, a new notification appears with the task. He needs to run 10 kilometers in 3 hours. As a reward, the young man will receive a medium-sized tonic for perfection. After completing the quest, a new one appears, which says that the guy needs to do 1,000 sets of push-ups in 2 hours. For this, he will receive a tonic. After making 55% of the required amount, Diesung begins to get angry at these tasks, and asks the system for a normal task. When the young man said this, a notification appears with a new quest. It is necessary to fight with the selected object and defeat it in an indefinite time. The next second, a huge creature called a crying demon appears in front of Diesung. In hell, the young man almost died because of him, but now he is glad to see this creature. The crying demon lands many blows on Diesung, but he manages to dodge. When the young man decides to strike back, the demon throws him away from himself. The guy lands on his feet and decides that being knocked down by a crying monster is humiliating. The demon continues to attack the young man, and he dodges the blows. At one point, the monster grabs Diesung, and then the young man remembers how he once dealt with a demon in hell. Rage appears in the guy's eyes and he manages to cut the demon's hand with a sword. Diesung remembered that he could summon a sword and thus he was able to get out of the clutches of a crying demon. The monster raises his wounded arm and begins to scream in pain. At this second, the young man rushes at the monster and defeats him, sending him to hell. After that, a message appears from the system stating that the mission has been completed. The next morning, Diesung's mom wakes up to the noise in the ward. She opens her eyes and directs her gaze towards the window. In front of her, she sees her son, who looked much healthier than yesterday. His body gained a healthy look and muscles, and his face did not look haggard. The patient was sent to the doctor for examination. While they were checking the working capacity of his limbs, Mom was talking to the doctor. The woman does not believe this, because at the last examination, the doctor said that rehabilitation would take more than 6 months. Why did Diesung start moving as usual in just 15 days? The doctor replies that he can't say anything at the moment. From a medical point of view, the patient's condition is inexplicable. Also, in order to calm the patient's mother, the doctor added that some peculiarities are usually revealed, so there is no need to worry about it. After a long examination, Diesung gets angry and asks the doctor to stop touching him. The man recoiled from the patient and, apologizing, said that such a sharp improvement in the condition was amazing. When the examination was over, Diesung strolled through the corridors of the hospital, stretching his arms. Behind him, he heard the voice of his mother, who was talking to a nurse. Mom, taking the girl by the hand, said words of gratitude. The nurse, in turn, replies that what she has done is not worth anything compared to what the woman has been through over the past 10 years. After hearing this conversation, the young man realized how hard it had been for his mother lately. Diesung clenches his fists and decides that from now on he will protect his mom. Diesung enters the men's room and goes to the pantheon. Once in place, he asks if it is possible to finish the implementation as soon as possible. A notification appears stating that in this arbitrary task, the young man can choose the level of difficulty at his discretion. The guy is serious, and he decides that whatever it is necessary to end it the first time. Therefore, Diesung chooses the difficulty level Hell. After that, a black ball with red cracks and a glow inside appears in front of him. The next second, the doppelganger Han Diesung appears from the ball. The dark side of the young man is coming at Diesung to strike. The opponent flies up to the young man, but he manages to push him away from himself. The doppelganger deals several more attacks. In the next second, Diesung is wounded. At that moment, the guy realized that he would not be able to defeat him either in strength or speed in his current state. The young man understands that the longer they fight, the more unprofitable it will be for him. The opponent runs up to Diesung and, stretching out his arm, strikes, thereby throwing the young man several meters away. Smoke appears around the guy, and he gets to his feet. The young man grins at the fact that the fake is many times stronger than himself. But Diesung does not intend to give up, so, raising his head, he says that today the dark side will die at his hands. In the next second, Diesung summons Bloodseeker's wrath. His eyes turn red, and a burgundy flame appears around his body. Seeing this, the enemy was taken aback for a moment, so he decided to attack. He strikes with his sword, but the weapon passes through Diesung's body. The young man takes the doppelganger by the head and presses him to the ground. He sits on top of the opponent and raises his sword to strike, but the dark side manages to slip out of his hands. Diesung turns his head in the direction of the opponent and realizes that he is also using the anger of the Bloodseeker. Diesung runs up to the enemy to attack, but does not have time. The opponent is behind him and plunges the sword into the young man's back. The next second, the guy is in reality. He is also standing in the toilet, but now his body is shaking from lack of vitality. Worried that the door is closed, the cleaner takes out the keys and starts opening the door. Diesung realizes that if he loses, then everything he has accumulated during this time will turn into nothing. Therefore, he needs to come up with something to kill his dark side. When this thought comes to him, the young man remembers about the inventory. Another cleaner enters the toilet and tells Aunt Kim that her name was on the 3rd floor. The woman pulls the keys out of the keyhole and leaves the toilet. At this moment, Diesung in the pantheon opens his inventory. The young man stretches his hand into the blue hole and from there the potion that he received for each completed task. It has been lying idle in his inventory all the time, but now it is what he needs. This is a medicine that will help increase endurance by 20%. If that's the case, then after drinking 5 vials, he will be able to fight properly. Diesung drinks the medicine and his wounds begin to heal. The young man runs up to the opponent and strikes. This time he manages to bring down the dark side, but the backlash is not long in coming. The guy takes out 2 more bottles of medicine and drinks them. Even though stamina is being restored, fighting is still difficult. Using 5 bottles of medicine, Diesung tries to repel attacks. The doppelganger flies up to the young man and grabs him by the neck. The doppelganger raises his sword to stab him in the stomach, and at that moment Diesung summons an inventory that appears in front of his stomach. The dark side thrusts the sword into the blue hole, and the young man strikes the opponent with the sword. The guy successfully completes the task and a notification appears from the system, which states that after the final restoration of the body in the real world, the young man will still be able to use the Hell system. After this message, Diesung returns to his former body with scars. He is glad that he managed to regain his strength, but these scars remind him of hard times in Hell. The young man asks the system to return him outside. But before that, a notification about an unread message appears. Diesung opens it and starts reading. The message says that Hell welcomes its new sovereign, Han Diesung. Since the sovereign has chosen to return to Earth during his absence, the celestial space will be sealed. The demons of the pantheon will be waiting for the arrival of their sovereign. After reading this message, Diesung realized that they needed help. But the young man does not intend to help them after 80 years of suffering from them, just because he became their sovereign. The guy shows the middle finger and again asks the system to let him out of here. Diesung is still in the hospital. He stands on one hand in his ward and does push-ups, the score of which exceeds 50 times. The door to the ward was open, so Mom and the doctor were watching what was happening. The doctor reports that Diesung is awakened. The woman recalls the doctor's words that her son is not like them. The man hurries to calm the young man's mother, saying that at the moment there are no specific symptoms of awakening, so there is no need to worry too much, but still it is impossible otherwise. The woman does not understand how this could happen to her son. The doctor replies that this is all they can do to help. The association should take care of the rest. Diesung's mom thanks the doctor for the help. Diesung and his mom are riding in a taxi, and the young man begins to talk about what he heard. He tried to pretend that he didn't notice anything, worrying about the task, but the guy understands that it can't be left so easily. Realizing that Mom is hiding something, a question appears in his head. He is wondering what has happened in 10 years of his absence. When they get home, Mom tells her son to rest while she's gone. Diesung goes into the house and sees a girl who is sitting on the floor by the box with money in her hands. When she sees the young man, she gets up and looks at the guy in surprise. Returning, the mother approaches her son and asks what he wants to eat. She sees Jisa in front of her and asks her daughter where she has been. The girl did not answer the phone while her mother was worried about her daughter. Hearing the girl's name, Diesung's eyes widen in surprise. The woman pays attention to an empty open box and realizes that her daughter has taken the money again. The girl shyly lowers her eyes to the floor and puts her hands in her pockets. The young man swears at himself for not recognizing his own sister. The girl tells her brother in a serious voice that he looks healthy, while in his absence every day was like hell. The upset girl is about to leave the house when the voice of those two collectors is heard outside the gate. One of them knocks on the door with his foot and threatens that if the woman does not open, then he will break down this door into the light of 3. The men continue to knock loudly with their feet on the iron door. When they began to doubt that this was really the woman's house, Jisoo came out from there. After giving them an evil look and unpleasant words, the girl left, and the men assumed that this was the debtor's daughter. Collectors entered the territory of the house, asking why the woman did not open the door, because she was at home. Diesung's mom ran up to the men apologizing for it. She explained that she couldn't call them as soon as they were discharged from the hospital today. The woman begins to take out bills from her wallet, saying that this is all she has at the moment. The man throws the wallet aside. His voice breaks into a rude shout, and he says that they did not come here for this paltry sum. The next second he hits the woman and she falls to the ground. Seeing this, Diesung becomes enraged. He approaches the bandit and strikes back. The man falls to the ground and his friend runs up to him to help. Diesung approaches them and the man with the scar on his face does not recognize him as the wheelchair user. The young man says that he wanted to meet them himself, but they came here by themselves. The guy comes closer to them and asks them if they know how he managed to survive in hell. When the man took Diesung's words for nonsense, the young man grabbed the bandit by the face and replied that he always returns everything to those from whom he got. At this second, the guy strikes the man's face. The collector falls to the ground, and Diesung orders him to get up, because he did not repay the entire debt. The man notices a wooden chair and, grabbing it, is going to throw it at the guy. But he fails to do this. The young man punches the chair with his hand and strikes another blow on the bandit's face. Seeing this, his friend gets up from the ground and pulls out a knife. He keeps his distance from the young man, but brandishes a knife in an attempt to strike. Diesung grabs the man by the hand and, remembering that the last time the bandit hit his mother with this hand, the young man breaks the man's limb. A man with a scar on his face comes to his senses and asks the young man if he will be able to live in peace after that. Diesung, with a grin on his face, approaches the man and, taking him by the collar of his shirt, says that there is one way in such cases: kill so that there are no leftovers. Suddenly the mother screams. She begs her son to stop it. When the young man is distracted by his mother's words, the bandits manage to escape from their house. They reach their car, and when the bandit with a wounded arm gets behind the wheel, they begin to discuss the disabled guy who was in the hospital last time. They don't understand how a person who has been in a coma for 10 years could change so quickly. Men are at a loss, they don't know what to do now. The boss told them to get at least a receipt from that woman. The man with the scar on his face replies that it doesn't matter anymore and they need to figure out a way to get a receipt. He looks out the window and sees Jisa, then asks his colleague to stop the car. Meanwhile, Mom tells her son about what happened over the past 10 years. When Diesung fell, the woman walked around a huge number of hospitals, not knowing what happened to him. Then she sold the house and left their shop. Mom thought that her son would recover quickly, but in the end, all the money they had flew away. On the recommendation of a friend, the woman received a loan in the financial sector, but it was not easy to repay the debt. Not only the amount on the loan was growing, but also the interest on it. Diesung decides to ask about his sister. He asks if Jisoo goes to school and why she has such an appearance. Mom replies that the girl dropped out the year before last. Last year, a woman injured herself while working at a diner and Jisoo said she would help. Diesung's sister is also suffering. During the day she works at a gas station, but at night she goes to work in a store. The young man says that it was necessary to stop her, because Jisoo has to study at school. The woman replies that she stopped, but it was necessary to follow her son. The guy replies that he should have left him. Mom asks her son not to say that, because they are a family. The phone rings, interrupting their conversation. The woman picks up the phone and says that these are the people. Diesung takes the phone from his mother and asks the men what they are calling for. After their answer, the young man becomes enraged. Men ride in a car with Jisoo. The girl's hands and feet are tied, and her mouth is sealed with duct tape. A collector with a scar on his face tells Diesung that the young man has a day to find 100 million. Looking at his skills, this task will not be difficult for him, the man adds. The bandit told Diesung not to do anything extra if he wanted his sister to stay alive. The guy hangs up and squeezes the phone in his hands. Worried by the expression on her son's face, Mom asks him why these people called and what they want. The young man is about to leave, informing the woman that he will be back soon. The woman stops her son and tells him that if it is something dangerous, then he does not need to go there. If the son goes to prison after hurting someone, the woman will not be able to live after that. A notification from the system appears in front of the guy. Diesung turns his head in the direction of Mom and asks her not to worry. On the sign it was written about the adaptation of the returned. The young man will receive a bonus as a reward, the release of basic skills. Diesung reads the message and says that if they were going to give something like this, they should have done it faster. Various skills appear in front of the guy and after quickly learning them, he makes a choice. Two men enter the building with Jisoo. One of them hopes that Diesung will not come here, and the man with the scar on his face replies that even if he comes, they still have the hostage. They enter the elevator and light flashes appear in the room. The man does not understand what is happening, but turning his head to the left, he notices Diesung. The guy was wearing a black robe, and his eyes shone with a purple light. Seeing the young man, the bandit gets scared and asks what he is doing here. Diesung grins and replies that he himself asked to bring money, so the young man is here. Of all the skills presented, the young man chose the Shadow Caster. When he clicked on the desired skill, a black liquid appeared in his hand, which was highlighted in blue. The young man summons a Shadow Caster, and the muck turns into the outline of a person. Diesung tears a piece of cloth from his hoodie and orders the shadow to track this man by blood and open the way to him. Hands appear from the blue flame and take a piece of cloth. The second man attacks Diesung's doppelganger. The guy dodges the blow and grabs the man by the face. Then the young man slams the man's head into the wall. Seeing this, the collector with the scar gets confused and asks Diesung if he is awake. The doppelganger does not understand what the person is talking about, and when she heard about it, horror and panic appeared in Jisoo's eyes. The next minute, the elevator stops, and the man runs out of it with the words that their guest is awakened, so you need to deal with him. After these words, Diesung strikes, and the man falls to the ground. People who are ready to attack the young man appear in the corridor. The guy quickly gets out of the elevator and the men try to attack the guy. They don't succeed because Diesung is many times faster than them. The young man quickly defeats all opponents and after a few minutes they are lying on the floor unconscious. Diesung goes into the elevator to his sister and, removing the tape from her mouth, asks about her well-being. The guy tells his sister to go home, and the girl asks why he doesn't go with her. The young man stops and replies that he needs to see something. The young man steps over the bodies of the men and goes on to his goal. After going further, Diesung approaches the steps. He goes up and is noticed by other bandits. The guy scratches the back of his head and says that these people are like fleas. They only know how to chat and annoy people. The next second, one of the bandits flies out of the window of the building. A pumped-up man with a lot of tattoos is sitting in the bathhouse. The phone rings and he picks up the phone irritably. The man gets angry and reminds that he said not to bother him when he is steaming. The voice from the phone says that they have big problems, so the man needs to return to the office urgently. He becomes enraged, and his interlocutor adds that the matter is urgent and it is necessary to come as soon as possible. The man's eye starts twitching, and he squeezes the phone in his hand, which is why it crumbles into small pieces. In the office, the bodies of unconscious men lie in the corridors. There are numerous wounds on their bodies and their clothes are stained with blood. Diesung enters the office, where a man, sitting on the floor and pressing against the table, is trembling with fear. The next second, the wall in the office crumbles and a man with tattoos appears from there. He grabs Diesung by the head and presses him to the floor. The young man tears a piece of cloth from the man's jacket and manages to get out. The guy shakes off his hands and asks the man if he is awake. A sinister grin only appears on his face, and the man replies that there is no need to regret and he will send the young man to hell. The man's body is rapidly increasing and the jacket on his body is torn and pieces of fabric fly off in different directions. But before he can strike, he gets punched in the face. Diesung says that if a man undresses, it will not hurt him less. After this blow, the bandit flies to the other end of the office. Diesung walks up to the man and slams him into the wall with his foot. The young man says that the bandit knows nothing about hell. When a guy says that his family has suffered during his absence, a man thinks that this guy is from a completely different category and he needs to survive. The bandit stretches out his hand and asks Diesung to stop. The man says he will give him anything, even money. Hearing about this, the young man asks where the money is. The bandit points his finger at the safe in the office. Diesung turns his head towards the safe and walks towards it. When the young man turns away, the man gets up from the floor and runs away. The guy approaches the man who has been hiding behind the table all this time and was trembling with fear. Diesung tells him that he will not leave now and will also get what he deserves. A tattooed thug sits in his car and promises himself to kill the whole family of this guy. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice behind him. He says that the man forgot to say the code to the safe. After looking in the mirror and seeing Diesung there, the bandit is horrified. Dark hands wrap around the bandit's face, and the young man says that what is important now is that he can know where the man is, and at any moment the guy can find him. The next moment, the bandit's car begins to shake. The screams of its owner can be heard from it. Diesung is standing on the roof of a building and money is falling from a black portal to the ground. The young man goes down and after counting the money, thinks about how long you can live on 500,003,201. He smiles and wonders about buying an apartment in Seoul. After a while, Diesung went to get a new phone. The store offered him a new model of a folding phone for 2,990,000 won. The young man picks up another pink phone and asks about it. The seller says that this is also a new model that is in good demand among girls. The man calls the price of the phone, 1,990,000 won. When a store employee noticed how the young man was thinking, the man thought that he was too persistent and decided to offer the customer an installment plan. But Diesung decided to buy both of the proposed phones. The seller is happy about this and, having packed 2 phones, wishes the buyer a good day and thanks him for the purchase. The guy returns home and puts the shopping bag on the computer table. Mom calls her son to the table, and the young man replies that he needs to go out. A woman enters her son's room and asks where he is going. But when she enters the room, she sees that Diesung was no longer there. It got dark outside, and Diesung went to dinner with Young-ho. A guy walks into a restaurant, and a friend waves his hand, beckoning him to himself. The friends start drinking and having dinner, and Young-ho asks Diesung if he has decided what he will do next. The young man replies that he does not know. Young-ho, in an attempt to reason with a friend, says that they are no longer stupid schoolchildren. Diesung decides to ask a friend how many floors he can buy in a house for 500 million. Young-ho replies that for this amount you can find an apartment with such a deposit somewhere outside Seoul. Diesung looks up at his friend in surprise and asks how much apartments in Seoul cost. Young-ho answers him that the average cost of an apartment reaches 2 billion won. The frustrated young man lowers his head, and Young-ho laughs. He says that the world changed a long time ago while the guy was in a coma. Diesung drinks another shot, and Young-ho says that his mom told him that Diesung woke up. The friend says that he will be able to answer this question only when he learns what awakening is. Young-ho laughs and remembers that Diesung couldn't have known about it even if he woke up. After a while, the friends go outside and Young-ho lights up. He tells a friend that some time has passed since he fell into a coma, and then various portals began to appear. At first, the authorities ordered to investigate this unusual phenomenon. At one point, these portals began to crack and monsters began to appear from there. They started attacking people. Even the strongest weapons did not take them. So they realized that they were not affected by human weapons, and the number of victims increased each time. Diesung asks about weapons, whether none really can kill a monster. Young-ho replies that it can be assumed that none of the weapons they are used to does not work on them. As time passed, they realized that they could only be affected by the aura weapon made from the biomaterial of the monsters themselves. But such weapons can only be used by the awakened, such as Diesung, and Young-ho points at a friend with a cigarette between his fingers. The young man thinks about waking up and opens his smartphone to find information about it. Young-ho notices a friend's new phone and Diesung replied that it was a new model. The guy grins and says that this model is outdated and now it can be taken for a song. Hearing these words, Diesung gets very upset. Young-ho continues to talk about the abilities of the awakened. One of them is that they can strengthen their body through aura control, even without using weapons. The guy remembers that Diesung quickly recovered his body and also that the young man recently beat the goons. Diesung makes a thoughtful face and asks if money is paid if he becomes awakened. The friend is surprised by these words and asks if Diesung is serious. The guy replies that he is not joking and asks how much you can earn on this. Their dialogue is interrupted by a sudden noise. Friends look up into the sky and see the portal that has opened. Monsters start coming out of there, and people around run for cover. A crowd of monsters is rapidly coming out of the portal. In the hands of the creatures hold bats, axes, and other various weapons. The screams of frightened people who tried to escape from the scene can be heard around. Diesung and Young-ho don't understand why the portal has opened right now. Diesung noticed that these monsters were different from those in hell. The young man picks up a stone from the asphalt and decides to fight them. He launches a stone at one of the monsters, and Young-ho reminds them that no weapon will work on them now. The guy shrugs off the words of his friend, and the creature pays attention to Diesung and runs in his direction. The monster raises his weapon to strike, and Young-ho closes his eyes, resigned to the impending death. But this does not happen, because Diesung blows the monster's head off and says that they can be dealt with bare hands. Diesung continues to kill monsters, and Young-ho assumes that his friend has become awakened above level B when people's screams are heard behind him. Young-ho realizes that there is no time to think. Monsters sat on buildings and inspired people with fear and panic. When Young-ho saw this, he shouted that he knew a safe place and asked to follow him. People start following the guy, but monsters appear in front of them. Everyone freezes, realizing that they are all about to be killed. The creatures begin to rapidly attack people. They wound them and knock them down. In the crowd of people there was a little girl who, seeing a big monster in front of her, froze in place from fear. The monster raises a baton to strike, but Young-ho manages to save the child. He covers it with his body and falls to the ground. The next second, Diesung appears and kills this monster. Seeing a friend, Young-ho is very happy about his appearance. The young man continues to fight with the creatures, and Young-ho tells the people to move towards the riverbed as quickly as possible. Not far from the scene of the incident, a guy from a restaurant was conducting a live broadcast. He filmed Diesung fighting monsters alone. People wrote enthusiastic comments dedicated to the young man. At one point, the young man does not have time to react and is hit by one of the monsters. The kid from the restaurant started shouting for the young man to move faster, but these words do not help Diesung in any way. The creature hits the young man, and he flies away a few meters, crashing into the car. Meanwhile, Young-ho went down to the sewer to the rest of the people and returned the missing girl to her mother. Tears gathered in the woman's eyes, and she rushed to Haeun, asking for her forgiveness. The child was crying too, and the girl ran up to her mother to hug her. Young-ho was watching this scene with a smile on his face when one of the men asked him if he was really going to go back upstairs. Diesung is sitting on the ground near the car with his head down. Monsters approach him to make sure that the person is dead. The guy who conducted the live broadcast realized that the young man was in great danger, and the viewers of the broadcast had already buried Diesung. One of the monsters raises his hand with a weapon up and strikes. The kid from the restaurant closes his eyes with his palm so as not to witness someone's death. Raising his baton, the monster does not find a person there. Diesung flies up to the monster from behind and blows his head off. The guy who led the live broadcast screams to his viewers that young man survived. While Diesung continued to kill monsters, the audience began to complain that the shooting was being carried out too far from the scene. The guy refuses to come closer because he doesn't want to die. Suddenly, the guy receives a donation of 5 million won. A message was signed at the bottom that if the guy took a closer picture of Diesung, he would send another 5 million. The guy thinks about the amount of money he can earn for this broadcast, but he's scared. He doesn't understand how he can get closer and stay alive. Diesung is rapidly killing monsters, and the guy receives another transfer from another person again in 5 million with the message that he will be sent more money for taking off the face of the monster killer closer. Then another message comes saying that if the guy finds more information about Diesung, he will get even more money. The kid started receiving deposits from viewers, and one of them transferred 20 million won to the guy. The viewer offered another 40 million for filming Diesung's face and providing detailed information about him. They should communicate by notes. Two men are sitting in the office and watching the broadcast of the guy from the restaurant. One of them said that he did as the head ordered. First, the man transferred 20 million and then offered another 40. The other man smiled and said that now this guy will start moving. The man who was sitting at the computer replied that their people were also heading in that direction, so they would be able to grab him. Meanwhile, Diesung climbed onto the corpse of one of the monsters and looked extremely menacingly at the other creatures. They began to back away from fright. Suddenly, a monster appeared who killed another monster with a club. The streamer was sitting behind the car and, pointing the camera at Diesung, begged him to turn the young man in his direction. The number of monsters did not decrease, and Diesung realized that if this continued, his strength would completely run out. Suddenly, Jong-ho appeared next to the kid who was conducting the broadcasts. He reminded the young man about the evacuation and took him by the neck away from the car. Out of fright, the guy dropped the camera, and Jong-ho continued to lead him away from the scene. When the young man realized that he would lose all his money, he tried to get out of Jong-ho's hands, but it was useless. They ran for cover, but the monster blocked their way. Seeing the monster so close, the kid from the restaurant fainted and foam began to flow from his mouth. At the moment when the creature was about to kill two men, Diesung flew up to them and killed the monster. The friends get to the nearest shelter and Diesung asks Jong-ho why he came back. The friend does not understand why the young man asked this question, so he replied that he was worried. Then Diesung asks if Jong-ho can stay alive. The young man explained that he needed to go to one place for 20 minutes. Jong-ho replied that Diesung should not worry, because the clans should come soon. A notification from the system appears in front of Diesung, which said that the implementation update was 100% thanks to the murders in this world. Just below it was written that the young man could use the items of the pantheon in this world. The system asked if the guy was ready to enter the pantheon. When the young man agreed, a portal appeared in front of him. Jong-ho saw it and his eyes widened in shock. He doesn't understand who Diesung is since he can open portals. Diesung enters the portal and finds himself in the pantheon. After entering there, he complains of pain in his body, although he has killed only a couple of monsters. Then the young man asks the system to show how much magic power he has left. A notification appears in front of the guy, which says that he has only 10% of his magical powers left. The young man scratches the back of his head and realizes that it wasn't about the weapon at all. He asks what is the fastest way to raise the level of magical powers. A message appears telling the young man to systematize his diary. Next, Diesung will know the time and place of the task, and after completing it, he will receive a reward. After hearing about the diary, the young man remembers the notebook in which he made notes while he was in hell, so as not to go completely crazy. A notification appears in which the system asks if Diesung wants to systematize the diary, and the young man confirms this action. A loading window appears on the table and his red diary appears in front of the guy. The system starts printing, and at this second, moments from his stay in hell pop up in Diesung's head. When the seal is completed, Diesung grabs his head because of the pain and asks to immediately go to the moment when he received magical powers, namely to page 16 in the forest with a predator. The system notifies about returning to page 16, being in hell for 5 years and 75 days. While Diesung returns to the past, Jong-ho and the kid from the restaurant climb the stairs. The streamer decides to ask the man about where the tough guy who defeated the monsters has gone. Jong-ho quickly opened it and asked why he needed this information. The man realized that the young man was offered money for revealing Diesung's face. Suddenly they hear a noise upstairs and Jong-ho asks the kid to climb in silence, because there may still be surviving monsters upstairs. A man receives a message on his phone from the leader of the Seoul clan, Hwang Jujun. The message says that those responsible for the evacuation from the clan are late, referring to the fact that today is the weekend. After reading the message and putting the phone in his pocket, Jong-ho mentally asks Diesung to come back as soon as possible. Diesung finds himself in the middle of a soulless desert. The system reports that the Predator's forest recorded on page 16 has been revived. It was signed from below that three-dimensional seals interfere with reproducing the picture. When the young man noticed that the place he was in was too quiet, a notification with a new task appeared in front of him. It is necessary to destroy the celestial being that has captured the Predator's forest. The system has allocated 1 hour to complete this task. As a reward, Diesung will receive a strengthening of magical powers. There will also be an additional reward. 2,000 points will be added to the total score. Diesung hears a noise around him and a creature appears in the sky. The monster releases the laser from his eyes, but the young man manages to dodge the attack. The monster descends to the ground and starts attacking the guy from there. There was a fairly small distance between them and Diesung decides to finish with this creature as soon as possible. The young man raises his hand and hits the opponent in the head. A crack appears on it and the monster falls to the ground. In the next second, the creature releases its claws from its hands. He buries them in the ground and rises with them. Calling his enemy annoying, the guy runs at him. The creature manages to get up from the ground, but Diesung strikes, because of which the monster's body shatters into small pieces. The guy asks to continue and turning around, he notices a red ball. After that, fear can be seen in his eyes. Jong-ho and the kid from the restaurant get to the roof of the building and, opening the door, see several corpses. The guy notices one man who was sitting on the ground and holding his stomach. They run up to the survivor and ask about his condition. The man starts making unintelligible noises, and when Jeong-ho gets closer, he hears the man telling them to run. Young-ho's body shivers, and turning around, he notices the monster. The monster's eyes are burning red, and an evil grin is visible on his face. The kid tells Young-ho to grab the injured man and they will run to the exit. But the man replies that it's too late. Jeong-ho forbids the young man to move until he says. The kid doesn't understand what's going on. The man tells the fellow and on his command to run to the door. The young man turns his head in fright towards the door and waits for the command. When the monster starts growling and heading towards the people, Young-ho gives the command to the young man. Meanwhile, in the predator's forest, the red ball increases several times and Diesung does not understand what is happening. The item informs about the beginning of rebirth and the body of the slain monster begins to recover. Diesung rushes to the side of the ball with all his legs and strikes at it. After that, the percentage of rebirth drops from 10% to 3%. The young man hits his feet on the ball and performing a backflip, lands on the object. The percentage of rebirth is growing rapidly, and Diesung continues to strike. At some point, silhouettes of the same monsters can be seen from behind the clouds. The creatures attack the guy with lasers from the eyes and he has to jump to the ground. 2% remains until the end of the rebirth, and Diesung realizes that in this way he cannot defeat the enemy, so he decides to find the answer in his memory. The young man leans his hand against his head and starts sorting through his memories. His thoughts are in a complete mess, so it is difficult for him to find the right solution. The guy still manages to find the right memory in his brain. Jeong-ho tells the kid to run to the door, and they rush as fast as they can to the exit. While the monster flies over them, the guys manage to reach the door and hide from the creature. The monster comes to the door and thrusts his hand into the doorway, trying to grope people. When the hand disappears, Jeong-ho suggests that the young man go down. Meanwhile, chaos reigns in the pantheon. 3 monsters attack Diesung, releasing their claws from their hands. The young man successfully flies past them and thinks that there is very little left. The guy gets to the trees and, pushing off from the tree, lands on the territory of the predator's forest. Monsters begin to determine the radius of the object's location and are going to attack, but it's too late. A huge creature appears from the ground, which quickly eats the celestial being. Diesung makes sure that the swamp whale still has the same appetite and will digest anything. A notification about the completion of the task appears again in front of the young man. Next, the reboot of Han Diesung's physical abilities begins. His body begins to light up, and the young man is convinced that there is really more power. The guy gets a bonus for completing the mission, the judge's dagger. Then a sign with information about the item appears. It is a holy object with which the heavenly judges punish their enemies. Also, it is a holy object made by peeling the epidermis from a golem. The stronger the owner, the stronger the weapon becomes. This dagger can be controlled remotely, so the young man launches the weapon into the sky. After flying a short distance, the dagger returns to the owner's hands. Diesung decides to return to Earth and a portal opens in front of him. The news anchor talks about the latest events. Recently, there was another opening of portals near Nangokden, and the area was subjected to chaos. A man cannot hide his emotions, because it seems that the situation that happened in Daegu is repeating itself. The presenter asks the professor what his observations on this incident are. The man replies that, firstly, the problem is that this area is managed by the Association of Hunters. He does not understand how people can trust people who are sluggish with the problem, so they also allow themselves days off. Portals are opened periodically, which means that you need to be alert on any weekend or holidays. In this case, the association should be held accountable, the presenter adds. 2 men from the Hunters Association are driving in the car. They watch the news and one of them is extremely outraged by what is being broadcast on the news. The man says that hunters from the association cannot receive as much as members of the clan. He is angry at the current situation because they cannot catch him even with the help of special equipment. A man in a suit is sitting in the next seat and asks the other to shut up. In any case, he does not know about them, but he, as a leader, will definitely be fired if they fail. From the guy's phone comes an urgent announcement that a dubious guard with injuries has now appeared in Nangokden. Young-ho and the streamer are hiding from the monster in a nearby restaurant. The kid asks the older one if there is no way to get out of here. It's creepy for him to be here when he remembers the man who died on the roof. Young-ho replies that he is also scared, but they have no other way out, they can only wait for rescuers. There is a crash outside, and the young man looks out from behind the table to find out what these sounds are. The guys mistook this noise for rescuers, but the next second an unknown person breaks through the wall, and Jeong-ho thinks they are monsters. The headless body of the monster falls into the restaurant, and with it Diesung. Seeing a friend, Young-ho rejoices at his appearance. The young man smiles and asks if he is late. Young-ho asks Diesung how he got here. The young man folds his arms on his chest and a grimace of pain appears on his face. A friend asks if Diesung got hurt. The guy ignores his words and turns to the streamer. He asks the kid to turn on the fire to fry some meat. They are both surprised by this request, because now is not the right time and place to eat. In this restaurant lies the headless corpse of a monster. Diesung replies that there is nothing wrong with that. The young man roasts his meat and while he eats, Young-ho and the streamer press their hands to their mouths in disgust. A man in a camouflage uniform enters the restaurant and says that there is a survivor here. The military sees a dead monster and 3 people. The boy begins to rejoice that they are alive and rushes to thank the man. The rescuer pays attention to the guy who ate meat. He doesn't understand how the young man manages to eat in such a situation. Jeon-ho wishes health by putting his palm to his forehead and thanks the man for the work done in such a deep night. He was worried that he couldn't find shelter in time. Noticing a strange expression on the military man's face, Young-ho approaches Diesung and explains that this guy is very shocked, so he behaves strangely. The military apologizes and says that they can't just leave. Realizing what the man is talking about, Young-ho takes out a business card that says that he is from the Seoul clan and is the head of Team 1. Seeing the business card, the man's face relaxes and he replies that he will see them off and asks them to follow him. A hunter from the association and a supervisor arrive at the scene. Corpses are scattered everywhere on the street, and the military is studying the situation. While the manager is inspecting the street, the hunter, leaning against the car, cleansed his stomach. It was unpleasant for him to see this picture. The leader shouts that now is not the right time for this activity, and sends a hunter to check the survivors. The guy apologizes and goes to one of the military. It is provided by a hunter from the association and offers to go inside together. The friends are driving in the car and Young-ho, who was driving, offers Diesung to spend the night with him today. Diesung refuses, saying that they are worried about him at home. Young-ho replies that it would be good if everything turned out to be excitement. Now everyone wants to catch Diesung. Young-ho says he will call his friend's mom himself, and while they are going to his place, they will take a shower and eat fried chicken there. Diesung walks into a friend's house and enthusiastically inspects the apartment. Young-ho sends a friend to wash, and he orders chicken. Diesung comes out of the shower and sees various food on the table. He is surprised by this gesture, and Young-ho says that his friend was never able to eat properly last time. Diesung reminds a friend of his words that if you become a hunter, you can earn money. Young-ho replies that now is the time when such people are appreciated. He also asks if Diesung is going to work as a hunter. The young man responds positively. Young-ho supports his friend's decision and says that if Diesung goes to the association and shows his abilities, he will definitely get a B level. And if he tries, maybe he will be able to get an A level. Young-ho guarantees it. Diesung decides to ask what levels the friend is talking about. Young-ho explains that it's like ranks. If he is at level B, he will be able to join a large clan, or become a member of the association. In any case, the salary will be serious, and at a level many times more. Then Diesung asks if there are levels higher. Young-ho replies that there is. There is a level S and there are only 5 such people out of 2 million awakened. Young-ho chuckles and asks a friend if he is going to become the 6th. The guy says that you don't need to have such ambitions. It would be good if Diesung was taken at least, and it's not so easy to get into level A in Korea. Young-ho asks his friend again to make sure of his words whether Diesung is really going to become a hunter. The young man nods his head. Then Young-ho asks to leave this matter to him, and they hit cans of beer, wishing each other great success. 2 men are sitting in a restaurant and one of them is having dinner while the other is trembling with fear. Next to the long-haired man is a photo of Diesung, and he points at it with a knife. He says that this crazy debtor destroyed their entire organization. The man sitting opposite agrees with his words. Lee Sagu is the leader of the Red Square clan. He wipes the corners of his lips with a white napkin and says that they are in a difficult situation. Lee Sagu gets up from his chair and continues, saying that if they were alive, they could have escaped. The man does not understand why they came to him and told him about it. Lee Sagu walks up to the man and puts her hands on his shoulders. The bandit begins to tremble even more with fear, and he says that they had nowhere else to turn. Lee Sagu replies that there was nothing else for him to do, because the bandit can't report to the police. However, Lee Sug doesn't understand why his interlocutor is trembling so much. Then he understands what's going on and asks if he's acting like this because of that bandit. Lee Sagu nods his head towards the dead bandit, under which there was a large pool of blood. Tears begin to accumulate in the man's eyes, and he begs Lee Soga to spare his life. The young man replies that he should not worry, because they are going to take only money. No matter how they were robbed, they probably still have hidden savings. The bandit replies that he held the lowest position, so he doesn't know anything about it. The man cries and asks to believe him. Lee Sagu puts his hand on the bandit's head and decides to believe him. The bandit does not believe his ears and thanks the head for it. In the next second, Sagu says that they will finish on this and the bandit's head shatters into pieces. Sagu walks away from the table and picks up a photo of Diesung, orders him to deal with it. Diesung approaches the building of the Hunters Association of Korea. Jeong Ho, who gave him a ride, says that first Diesung will need to go inside and tell the employee at the entrance that he has come to receive a certificate of his awakening. Then they'll tell him everything. Diesung nods to his friend and starts to leave. Jeong Ho shouts after him so that he does not forget to use polite speech. At the end, the friend adds that he will go to work while Diesung is busy and asks him to write to him when the results come. The young man comes closer to the building and notices a large number of people at the entrance, who also came here to get a certificate. Diesung was sitting in the corridor outside the examination room. Sitting in line and looking down at the ticket, the young man realized that hunters are quite a sought-after position. He hopes that they will reach number 9 quickly. A message from his mother comes to the young man's phone. She asked him if he was still at Chang Ho's. The woman warned her son that her back ached and she took a day off at work. Diesung decided that it was better for his mom not to know what he was going to do. Therefore, he answers that he is still at Young Ho. He wanted to take a shower slowly and go home. In response, a message comes asking if Diesung has eaten. If not, then let him come home. Jisoo wanted to have lunch together and went to get soup, mom writes. The young man smiles, looking at the phone screen and wants to return home as soon as possible. A girl comes out of the ward and informs that the 9th number is next in line, so you need to be ready. The young man looks down at the piece of paper with the number and hears the screams of his grandfather. The man was arguing with the employee, convincing him that he was awake, because he definitely felt that this had happened to him. The employee tries to explain to the man that if the drug does not recognize this, then the person is not awake. But the grandfather does not hear the young man. He shifts the blame to the drug, saying that it is defective. People in the queue are getting angry, because it has become too noisy in the corridor because of Grandpa's screams. The man points his finger at his head and says that he is definitely awake, because almost all his hair fell out during the night. After hearing this, the visitors start laughing, and Diesung is angry about this situation, because he has a delicious soup waiting for him at home. When Grandpa starts threatening the employee that he will go to the boss and report everything, Diesung approaches him from behind. The young man puts his hand on the man's head and reminds him that people in the corridor are waiting for their turn. The grandfather faded away and lowering the tone of his voice says that they have worthless equipment, because he is definitely awakened. When a young man asks an employee if the device is really broken, a man approaches them and says that he can check its performance, because he is awakened. He goes to the machine and puts his hand to the ball, which lights up green, which indicates that the man has a sea level. After that, the girl asks the man to get out, because there is a queue in the corridor, and the grandfather does not calm down and says that the device may be wrong. The employee apologizes to Diesung for the incident and invites him in. When the young man walks away from the staff, the girl whispers to her son-in-law that this guy is likely to have a high level. The man grins and snapping his fingers on the girl's forehead tells her to work, not to make eyes. The worker recalls that at the moment when Diesung approached his grandfather, the young man caused her a feeling of fear. Therefore, she concludes that if the young man is awakened, then he will definitely be above level B. A phone call rings in the office of the branch manager. The man picks up the phone and asks what happened. The voice on the phone asks the head to go down to the 6th floor in the 3rd ward. The man does not understand why he needs to go down there, and the voice replies that it is better for him to see it for himself. A man rides in an elevator and thinks that someone with an S level has appeared. But the head quickly discards these thoughts from his head, deciding that, as usual, one of the subjects is brawling. People gathered near the 3rd ward, who were watching what was happening. The head pushes people aside and goes into the ward. Entering the office, the man sees that glass balls are broken on the apparatus for checking the level of awakened ones. A guy approaches the manager and explains that when Diesung approached the device started flashing different colors. This happened for the first time. A little earlier, when Diesung put his hand to the device, the ball lit up with various colors. Seeing this, the young man asked the employee if this should be the case. The man replied that this sometimes happens, and at that moment the glass balls cracked and smoke filled the ward. The manager asks his employees if there was a malfunction of the devices. The employee replied that they had checked 3 devices, and they all reacted in a similar way. The manager replied that all these devices could not be broken. Hearing the conversation of the men, Diesung hoped inside that they would not demand monetary compensation from the young man. The guy decides to ask what he should do now and whether he needs to wait for the results to appear. The manager thought that if they continue to test it in this way, then they will only break the rest of the devices. The man clears his throat and tells Han Diesung that this is the first time they have encountered such a situation, so the decision should be made by the border guards. Diesung doesn't understand who the man is talking about. He explains that in a situation where the apparatus cannot be determined, the judges conduct a licensing test, and based on its results, they identify the level. The young man asks if this test will be fair. He is told that the assessment will take place according to the established criteria, so the young man cannot worry about this. The young man accepts this outcome of events and, after saying goodbye to the employees of the association, leaves. The head wipes the beads of sweat from his forehead with the words that they cannot live in peace. The worker approaches the man and asks him about the fact that the crystal ball reacts to foreign energy in the body of the awakened. The supervisor confirms her words, and the girl assumes that Han Diesung's energy has exceeded the scale that the ball can withstand. After all, it is possible that the balloon exploded for this reason. Upon hearing this, one of the employees laughs into his fist and, catching the girl's gaze on him, apologizes. The manager believes that the girl's assumption is nonsense, because judging by her words, Han Diesung is above the S level. The employee replies that there is such a possibility. The man answers her so that she thinks before she speaks. There's a lot of fiction going on in the world right now, but Diesung can't be a god if you rely on the girl's words. The young man returns home and decides to call his friend Young-ho. He asks about the results of the inspection, and Diesung replies that he was sent to the border guards. After hearing about the border guards, Jong-ho assumes that the device failed, but the young man denies his words. Then Young-ho asks what happened. Diesung replies to a friend that the device is broken. After hearing about this, Young-ho hoped that his friend had not made a scandal there, but Diesung again answers in the negative. A classmate decides to clarify the order of Han Diesung's actions. He asks that after the young man put his hand on the device, as he was told, it broke down. Diesung finally gives a positive answer. Young-ho replies that his friend is full of surprises. He is also confident that Diesung will pass the test and get a high level. Sensing something strange, the young man stops and replies that he doesn't care. The friend finally says that later he will send the date of the test and all the information about it to Diesung. After saying goodbye to a friend and completing the call, the young man turns back and sees a house that was under construction. Diesung looks closely and sees a man on the top floor who is aiming a firearm at him. The girl thinks that no matter how you look, the young man does not look so strong. But she doesn't care how strong he is, one shot will solve everything. When the girl points the sight at Diesung, the young man slowly turned his head in her direction and pointing his fingers at the head said that she should shoot at this place. The killer did not expect that she was discovered, because this has never happened to her. The killer straightens up and wonders how the guy can hear her voice from such a distance. When the girl decides to hide, Diesung tells her to shoot again. Hearing this, the girl sits down again and shoots the young man. The girl hits the target and smoke appears around the guy. When it dissipates, she sees that the young man was completely unharmed. He continued to stand still. The blonde does not believe in what is happening, because it was not a simple cartridge, but an aura bullet. The girl looks at the guy to understand who he is. After a second, she tells herself to pack up and get out of here first. The killer leaves the weapon and runs away as fast as he can. But she does not have time to do this. Her leg is wounded by Diesung's dagger and she falls to the floor. The next moment she sees her victim in front of her. A smile appears on his face and the young man regrets that the girl did not aim well, but even so she will not be able to kill him. The girl pulls out a gun from behind her back and points it at Diesung. The blonde asks why he stayed alive after the aura weapon and where he came from. The guy replies that he is Han Diesung, returned from hell. The killer loses his temper and says that everything said is nonsense. This guy was a real monster in her eyes. The girl starts shooting at the young man, but he is unshakable. When the cartridges in the pistol run out and a cloud of smoke forms in the place where she shot, the girl asks aloud to herself whether Diesung has died. Suddenly, a young man's voice is heard behind her. The girl is confused because she saw him fall. The guy grabs the blonde by the neck and presses her against the wall. She tries to get out of the trap, but black silhouettes with red eyes appear behind her, laughing ominously. When the girl loses consciousness, the young man looks at her and thinks that he did not even emit his poison. and the blonde is already unconscious. Diesung collects bullets from the floor and pays attention to the guitar case. The young man approaches him and sees his photo there, as well as pictures of his sister and mother. The killer wakes up and starts screaming. She is pressed against the wall by dark, blurry hands that do not allow the girl to escape. The young man approaches her and tells her to answer his questions. If he says too much or talks nonsense, then Diesung will kill him. The young man asks the girl about who sent her. After hearing this, the killer realizes that not a single word about the Red Horse clan can slip through. Then she remembers one person who is listed as missing. If the girl gives him a tip, then Diesung will not suspect anything. The girl calls her name Kim Sohun. Hearing this name, the young man asks who it is. The blonde replies that this is the bully whom Diesung recently robbed and even took money from the safe. The young man remembers about 500 million, and the girl rejoices and decides that first she needs to get out of here. The blonde confirms his words about the named amount and says that if Diesung lets her go, she will tell about where this person is. In the next second, the young man releases an attack from his hands, which punches a hole in the girl's shoulder. A girl screams, and she asks why she got hit, because she told everything. Diesung replied that she was too kind for a mercenary. The young man repeats that if the blonde starts talking nonsense again, he will kill her. The girl realizes that she was too hasty and now does not know what to do. The guy again asks his question, who sent her? The girl realizes that she has already failed the task. Even if she managed to get out of here alive, the man from the Red Horse clan would kill her. Wherever she goes, the result will be the same. The blonde puts her hand to her chest. The area around her lights up with a purple light. She says that no matter how much the young man asks her, the answer will still be the same. This behavior infuriates Diesung, so putting two fingers in front of him in the form of a pistol, the guy kills the killer. Diesung is angry that he has not found out who sent the girl, and, on top of everything else, he will have to clean up the corpse. The young man puts his hand to his head and starts reading the diary. Having named the keyword, the memory of the deceased, the guy begins to search for information. Having found the right page, the young man opens a portal to the pantheon. He understands that there are already enough portals open, but it will be better if he finds out something. Once in the pantheon, the system welcomes Han Diesung. Then the following notification appears with a question about what date and place the young man would like to visit. Diesung names page 134, which is written about the imprisonment of the soul. Soul imprisonment is the main royal weapon, along with the Demon King, one of the 15 main forces of hell. This is an artifact that connects with the deceased through blood. Initially, Diesung thought that with the help of soul imprisonment, he would be able to fight comfortably, but the one with whom he associated himself turned out to be too weak. A message appears in front of the young man, in which a page, years and days were written, namely 134 pages of 67 years and 198 days. A little below was written the question of whether the young man wants to return to the pantheon. Diesung understands that the situation is different on Earth, so this time he uses it properly. The young man confirms the action and takes him to page 34 in a place called Ghost River. Once on the spot, the young man examines the area and realizes that on the other side of this river is the territory of the king. There used to be a boat there and a young man could cross the river, but now there was no boat, not even trees, and it was impossible to swim across. Putting a body in a river would mean destroying it with the dead. Suddenly, a notification appears from the system, on which information about a new task is written. It is necessary to destroy the celestial beings that capture the river in 30 minutes. The enemies discover an unidentified intruder in the form of Diesung and are going to attack. While the creatures are waiting for approval for destruction, the young man raises his eyes to the sky and monsters with purple eyes. Then a notification appears on which the origin of the White Lord was told. This is a mechanical structure that operates independently. The monsters get permission to destroy and start attacking. In the hope that the young man will be given a boat for winning this task, he runs to the opponents, pulling out his dagger. Diesung quickly runs past the attacks of mechanical creatures. The strongest of all the monsters present releases small purple bombs from its trunk, but Diesung manages to react and runs away from the blows in time. Then the guy runs up to the largest creature and inserting a dagger into the belly runs along the monster, thereby killing the monster. The monster falls to the ground, and attacks in the form of purple bombs begin to fly from the sky to the young man. The guy lands on the ground to prepare for further combat.